Roundy one.
Yeah, it is a big roundy one.
Look at Lee. I don't like to talk about people's appearences, but you look
Should
very
I talk about yours as the man that dogs you all the time?
I know what I says. I don't like doing it. Doesn't mean you don't.
No, I love it. Come here, better go. News is late.
Go on.
Good luck.
All right, then. Let me see. Yes, nothing's happened if I push those faders up. It is 9 o'clock. Let's get a news update. Good morning, Michaela Clark.
Thanks, Greg. Good morning. A Donegal deputy says it's imperative mental health services for children and young people in Donegal are properly resourced, fully staffed and provide the support when and where needed. Sinn Féin brought forward a motion in the Dáil last evening on the back of serious concerns over patients currently accessing child and adolescent mental health services in Ireland. Deputy Padraig McLaughlin says it's clear the processes in place are not fit for purpose. He says there needs to be a complete overhaul of the CAMHS model.
When we look at people with profound mental health difficulties across Donegal and across the country, they start often in the teenage years. So it's critical that there's an intervention, there's a support immediately. That means resourcing mental health services properly and not relying, as we do in Donegal, on the goodwill and good hearts of the voluntary sector.
Donegal County councillors have passed a motion opposing the granting of licences for prospecting anywhere in Donegal. Councillor Michael McMahon told members this week a strong resolution has been passed by Leitrim County Council and he believes Donegal must follow suit to protect its clean waters and its reputation as a tourist destination. Officials noted the motion and pointed out that even if a licence is approved by the Minister, planning applications must be submitted and assessed in the usual way. Councillor McMahon says Donegal has a lot to lose.
We have been bombarded with prospectors who have no respect and have no regard on anybody. We're a tourist area, we're a tourist county, and in the water, the environment, and we hear all this talk about the environment. I'm starting to be very worried about the environment. I'm very worried about the chemicals these people bring with them, and also the way they treat residents, the way they treat farmers, and the way they treat the general public.
A tidal wave of evictions are likely to happen if the government decides to lift the current ban in place. That's the view of People Before Profit TD Paul Murphy, who says although homelessness is at an all-time high, the rate of increase has slowed since its introduction. Taoiseach Leo Varadkar told the Dáil yesterday that a decision on cost of living supports will be made in mid-February. Deputy Murphy says the eviction ban cannot go if the government wants to address this incredible national scandal.
We now have 11,500 people homeless. It is, an incredible national scandal. If you trace the evolution of the figures of the number of people homeless, the winter ban has been imposed and the rate of increase has substantially slowed as a consequence. If what is the partial eviction ban is lifted on the 1st of April, we're going to see a further tidal wave of evictions.
Weather now, a mix of sunny spells and scattered showers today. Breezy with highest temperatures of 7 to 9 degrees. That's all from Highland Radio News for now. We'll be back with news again at 10 o'clock. Until then, good morning.
Banking can make you feel a bit... So why not switch to a provider that helps you take control of your finances? The An Post Money current account lets you see exactly what's going on with your money and gives you control with the tap of a button. Switch with the An Post Money app or pop into one of our 900 plus post offices. You don't even need to make an appointment. Take back power over your money today. An Post is authorised by the Minister for Finance to provide payment services and is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland in the provision of such services.
The county's #1 talk show, The 9 till Noon Show on Highland Radio. And now, it's time for the talk of the Northwest, The 9 till Noon Show with Greg Hughes on Highland Radio.
Hello, good morning. 4 minutes past 9, Wednesday, the 1st of February. It's the first day of Celtic Spring too. How are you keeping this morning? I do hope you're very well. And thank you for choosing your #1 local radio station, Highland Radio. We're here with you for the next 3 hours in the 9 till Noon Show, and loads to keep you informed and entertained. So stay with us and get involved in the conversation. WhatsApps and text 086 60 25,000, 086 60 25,000, or give us a call on 07491 25,000, and you can watch this programme as well on your smart TV or your Fire Stick. Go to the YouTube app, type in Highland Radio Ireland, like and subscribe there if you don't mind. Same with Facebook Watch, or just go directly to those apps on your phone or tablet or laptop and search out Highland Radio, or on our website, highlandradio.com. Thank you very much to Donal, who sat in for me yesterday. We were down watching Lewis Capaldi on Monday night, strange old Monday night, down at the 3 Arena, and a few local faces down there as well, actually. It's a small country, isn't it, that you can go to a venue with 12 or 13 odd thousand and bump into people that you know at the other end of the country almost, the other side of it at the very least, but he's excellent now. It was a fantastic night. And as I say, thanks to Donald for facilitating that yesterday. Let's get on to the newspapers today. The Finn Valley Voice, Ballybofey and Stranorlar have been dealt with unfairly by Transport Infrastructure Ireland, according to Councillor Patrick McGowan. His motion at Donegal County Council's plenary meeting, on Monday at County House Lifford demanded a public consultation to review Department of Transport and NTA initiative zebra crossings without beacons that are being pitched in the Twin Towns. Now, you know, we've spoken about this quite a bit on this show as well, but in driving down to Dublin there the other day, you drive through the route I took anyway, quite a number of villages, and they've got these beautiful crossings with big pelican crossings, you know, big flashing lights at the top. And you think, wow, what a great way of doing things. And then here we are trialling out something that removes those safety elements. And it was only then the other day when I was coming down Donegal Road and a gentleman was crossing the road, and it was a real close one. He nearly was wiped out of it on that crossing at the bank there. People don't want it to go, they just want it to be safe. And it feels, as a motorists and from the pedestrians I'm talking to, from a pedestrian's perspective, it does not feel safe. That one in particular. The others, I think we can come to terms with, but that particularly, given the layout of that junction, seems problematic. Well, drivers and pedestrians have identified the crossing at the Bank of Ireland Ballybofey as the most dangerous. The crossings are also being piloted in Limerick and Dublin. Councillor McGowan wants advance advisory signage erected immediately to inform drivers and pedestrians of new pedestrian crossing layouts ahead, as well as the removal of any dangerous crossings. But the one at the Bank, keep it because people want it, but put up the 2 poles with orange things on the top. People know what it is. And try that. Let's pilot that because it works elsewhere. Why would you pilot something that removes safety features? I can't get my head around it, but I don't want to bore you as if it's some sort of a hobby horse of mine. It's not, but I just fear that someone's going to have the legs taken from under them or worse at that junction. The Irish Times this morning, Fulch Ireland has said it will work with locals over concerns about plans for the Tourist Visitor Centre at Dunree, which is expected to open in April 2026. The €12.5 million project, the biggest single investment by the state in a tourism facility in the country, is aimed at producing a visitor attraction that will explore the history of the site, its people and its ecology. The Donegal Post this morning, positive news. After months without a GP service, the community of Duncanely has welcomed a new doctor to the health centre. Dr. Janinda Mohandrianj, and I hope I've pronounced her name correctly, has been formally appointed to the post and has taken up the role as GP Duncanely on a full-time basis. Cahirloch of the Municipal District of Donegal, Councillor Niamh Kennedy, said, I absolutely welcome the appointment of the GP. On to the Irish Independent now, and NCT backlog leaves 375,000 vehicles on the road without a cert. Now, the whole notion of these, the NCT obviously, is that cars are safer, isn't that the notion of it? But they don't have the facilities, clearly, or the resources to ensure that all cars are certified. That's 375,000 is an awful lot of cars. There's 160,000 people in Donegal. Heads, effectively double that, and you're getting close to the amount of vehicles without an NCT. Well, the operator of the National Car Test, Applus Automotive, will today blame the problem on a range of issues, including a high proportion of motorists failing to show for appointments and its ageing workforce. So it's our fault, really. The Irish Independent previously revealed how motorists in some parts of the country are waiting over 6 months to secure a test appointment. Representatives from the NCT will apologise for the backlog when they appear before the Oireachtas Transport Committee today, but they'll also admit further challenges lie ahead in the coming months. Well, why don't they have a system whereby they book your car in automatically and notify you and say your car is due for a test on the 3rd of February 2023. If this appointment doesn't suit you, please change it. Try and pre-book them or something. I don't know. Try something different, because what they're doing here isn't working. You know, let's have opt-out testing times then. The firm will outline how there are 375,000 vehicles overdue their NCT, which it says is more than double the normal amount for the early months of the year. The company, which will be represented at this meeting by its country manager, Mark Sinnott, will also outline how 3,500 people a week are not attending appointments they made for their vehicles to be tested. Let us switch over now to the Irish Times. And Varadkar defends nursing home legal strategy. Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has defended the use of a legal strategy aimed at containing the state's potential liability on private nursing home charges. Speaking in the Dáil yesterday, Mr Varadkar described it as a legitimate legal strategy by the government. Now, we learned on RTE last night, though I haven't watched the programme, that this is seemingly common practice. He said that although he must have been briefed on it, he did not recall being briefed or authorising the strategy, which has been strongly criticised by the opposition in recent days. So what he said there is he must have authorised it. He must have been briefed on it, but he simply can't remember. The government is coming under pressure to explain why it adopted such a strategy and to clarify which ministers were privy to the plans, with opposition TDs demanding to know who sanctioned the approach. And also, I think opposition TDs should be asked, will they continue this strategy? If they are elected into power, will they remove this strategy? Because if they do, it could expose the state to billions of euro in claims, not just in this area, but also in other areas as well. So I think, as well as the opposition trying to call out the government on this issue, they need to state what they would do in power. Would they abandon this strategy, or would they go, well, you know what, we have to protect the country's finances? Because I think that's a really important question. Tánaiste Micheál Martin said through a spokesperson that he was not aware of a number of memos from 2011 onwards which reaffirmed the strategy, while former Minister for Public Expenditure Brendan Howlin, who was reportedly copied in on the early memo, also said he could not recall ever being briefed. The memories have gone to pot. Attorney General Rossa Fanning is now preparing a report on the matter for Cabinet next Tuesday, and the government has committed to publishing the report. There will also be Dáil statements to the on the controversy after the report is published. But as I say, what is critical at this time is, I think, the opposition or whomever might be in power in the next government to state, are they going to scrap such a strategy, not just in this area, but in other areas as well? On to the Irish Daily Mail. An extension of drinking hours across the country would be harmful to public health and safety, experts have warned a Dáil committee. A number of stakeholders have warned an Oireachtas committee that the proposed Sale of Alcohol Bill 2022 would not fulfil its purpose of reducing alcohol-related harm. The Joint Committee on Justice, in examining the bill, unveiled by the Minister for Justice Helen McEntee last year, which proposes a major modernisation of the country's licensing laws. One of the elements of the bill is to support the nighttime economy by enabling bars to stay open an hour later until 12:30am, 7 nights a week. It also proposes creating new annual permits for late bars and nightclubs, which would replace special exemption orders. The committee heard from a number of public health organisations that deal with alcohol-related harm. Now, the bottom line is any drink is harmful. So I think anyone in the business of reducing alcohol-related harm is not going to endorse such a thing, because we are already drinking too much, even under the current safe, in inverted commas, guidelines. I'm not sure of the appetite amongst the general public for longer opening hours of pubs or bars, but I'm probably a little out of the loop now, so maybe there is a huge interest in that. On to the Irish Sun. Thousands of families who use childminders could soon see their bills plummet. Creche fees were cut by up to 25% last month after government subsidies announced in the budget finally kicked in. Help offered under the National Child Care Scheme was increased from just 50 cent per hour to 140 per hour. The government claims the average saving per child is 1,200 a year. However, thousands of parents who use childminders instead of creches are unable to benefit from the scheme. Children's Minister Roderick O'Gorman yesterday brought proposals to Cabinet that would address the anomaly and enable parents who pay childminders to get the same subsidies on their childcare. There are an estimated 15,000 childminders in Ireland, but only 80 are registered with Child and Family Agency TUSLA. Parents paying unregistered ones won't be able to claim the cash boost, but thousands are expected to register ahead of the legislation becoming law. But what does registration entail here? I'd be interested to hear from childminders out there, because certainly in some cases, I'm sure it's done in their own home. The children are adopted almost into the home as a second home. If they have to register with TUSLA, will they have to have warning stickers everywhere and price lists and have to jump through all manner of hoops where some people might say, do you know what, for what I'm charging, it's not worth it. That would be my concern, because then if they don't do that right, I think people then in general childcare and creches might say, well, this is not a level playing field. We're having to pay these wages. We're having to jump through these hoops. Why are this group not having to do so? I have a feeling that's one's going to get pretty controversial. What do you think out there? Obviously parents will get some financial help, but a lot of people who provide childcare will have to have TUSLA in, will have to have their property up to a certain standard, I'd imagine. It hasn't been drafted yet. We don't know what they'd be looking for, but it sounds to me like maybe are they trying to fix something that isn't broken? I don't know. The Irish Daily Star this morning: detectives investigating the death of Natalie McNally were last night quizzing a suspect. The PSNI announced yesterday they had arrested a 32-year-old man in the Lisburn area. The man arrested had been detained before on December 19th, the day after Natalie was killed at her home in Lurgan. It's understood officers had initially released the 32-year-old after deciding he was no longer a suspect. The arrest comes after police earlier this month carried out house-to-house inquiries in the Lisburn area. A car was also seized from an address in the Lisburn and Castlereagh area. It's unclear if the seizure of the car is directly connected to yesterday's arrest. A 46-year-old man and another 32-year-old man are currently on police bail, having also been arrested by major investigation team officers investigating that awful murder. And last but not least, well, maybe it is least actually, the Irish Daily Mirror. A high street coffee had 4 times the amount of caffeine compared to a can of Red Bull, tests have revealed. I'm surprised at this. Consumer group Which found a medium cappuccino at Costa contained 325 milligrams of caffeine. By comparison, a 250 millilitre can of Red Bull has 80 milligrams of caffeine. Costa packed the biggest caffeine punch among popular chains, with the equivalent of 4 cups of tea. At the other end of the scale, a Starbucks cappuccino had the lowest caffeine content with at least 66 milligrams, which meant Costa had nearly 5 times that amount when tested. Now, I would have guessed Red Bull was wedged with caffeine compared to coffee, but if you go into Costa, at least according to this test, 4 times as much caffeine as in a can of Red Bull. I wonder will be people throwing a vodka into it. Who's to say? I certainly wouldn't encourage it. Okay, that was a run through the papers this Wednesday morning. We're going to be speaking to our guests, the first of them, in just a couple of moments.
Courtesy of Kelly Centra Mountaintop Letterkenny, the 2022 C-Store National Off-Licence of the Year.
The 9 till Noon Show with Bluebird Care, providing home care services for all ages in Donegal. Visit bluebirdcare.ie and bring care home.
If you smell gas at home or on the street, don't ignore it. Open windows and doors. Don't smoke, vape, or use a naked flame. Don't unplug or switch anything electrical on or off. Turn off the gas at the meter. Then, no matter who your gas supplier is, call Gas Networks Ireland on 1800 20 50 50. Visit gasnetworks.ie to screenshot the safety steps, save them to your device and share with friends and family.
Join Homeland and Nutrius Animal Feeds for our Farming Future event at 8 p.m. in the Mount Errigal Hotel, Letterkenny on Tuesday, 7th of February. An informative evening highlighting essential schemes such as CAP 2023, forage advice and the 2022 Donegal Silage Competition results and presentations. Speakers will include representatives from Teagasc and Grassland Agro. Enjoy spot prizes, refreshments and meter suppliers on the evening. 8 p.m, 7th of February, Mount Errigal Hotel, Letterkenny. Looking forward to seeing you there. For more info, visit homeland.ie.
Okay, we welcome on to the programme now Karina Malloy, a former Army officer. Karina, good morning to you.
Good morning, Greg.
It's good to have you with us. Yep, thank you very much for joining us. Right, your new book, A Woman in Defence, has been released. I have a copy of it here in front of me. What's it feel like to have your book out there and available for public consumption? Is there a mixture of emotions there?
Yeah, it's a bit surreal because I've been manifesting this book since 1982. I started my diaries in 1982 and even had the title of my book since 1984, but that wasn't the title that was used. My original title was deemed to be too negative for the publishers, but we compromised and I got it in as a title of a chapter in the book. So yeah, so it's great to actually see it in print and hold it in my hand.
And I also have one right here with me. In telling, did you want your story out there? Like, is this about your experience? Is this sort of something of a whistleblowing exercise, or is this just to let people know? Like, what is your motivation for this, and what was your wish to do this, Karina?
Yeah, the original thought whistleblowing did never entered my head. Originally, it was twofold. Because I'm part of such a historic group of women, 38 of us joined, and we were the real pioneers of the Irish Defence Forces. I felt that on behalf of all the other women, somebody had to write about us. And I just felt, well, we did try and attempt to write a collective book, but it failed in the first hurdle. So I decided then, having been involved with the Women of Honour, I said, right, well, this is a good avenue to go ahead and try and get my story out there. But originally it was to write the historic significance of being part of the first female group to join the Defence Force.
Yeah, and it's a difficult story that you tell, and it's you know, obviously it's going to be a difficult read in parts, but it's also too about you, you know, pursuing your career despite an awful lot of people's efforts, and perhaps even despite the institution's efforts almost.
Yeah, it's I mean it's not all bad. No, I would say 80% of it is pretty good, and there's a few funny stories as well. But yeah, it's a story of resilience, and from my point of view was you know, my attitude was, well, if you're not in the room, you can't change the room. So I decided to stick it out and just, it has to get better, and to pave the way for all the other females that came in. And thankfully it did get better for them in parts, in a lot of parts actually. It got really, really good for them.
Yeah, and it's interesting really to get an insight into how that comes about, because often we hear of, you know, your experience and then maybe the modern day experience, if I can put it like that, but there's an awful lot has to happen in between those 2 points, and I think your book gives us an insight into how things changed and how slowly they can change, and how things can be exposed and what have you.
Yeah, it's interesting to read it, because I mean, not in my wildest dreams did I ever think when I joined, oh, I'm going to be the first woman to attempt the Army Rangers selection course. I'm going to be the first female in the Eastern Command coming in today. I'm going to be the first female this, the first female that. I never joined for those accolades. It just happened to work out that way. But you're right, people don't realise that it took a long time to break down those barriers. And I mean, I'm not the only female that had to break down the barriers.
Yeah.
We all had our own little individual fights to get where all the other girls got to as well.
And would you call your experiences as part of that journey, what you experienced, sexual assaults, bullying, the promotional glass ceiling, how do you characterise them as part of, are they sacrifices? Are these things you had to sacrifice to get to where you wanted to go, or to maybe make it easier for those that followed you? I mean, how would you categorise them in your experience within the army?
Yeah, I personally feel I sacrificed a lot. I didn't get married. I didn't have children. But there again, there are a lot of girls out there now that are still that are managing to combine all of that. But maybe, I mean, yes, that was my personal choice, because I was just really focused on my career, and I didn't want anything to interfere with that. But it's the same in every society. Women, they have to be great at juggling everything, but they also have to work twice as hard to get half the respect. You know, and I feel that the lack of respect throughout my entire career was the one thing that really, really hurt.
It takes a while for an institution the size of the army, and that has been the same way for so long. And there are many other examples. It takes an awful lot of time for change, and really often an awful lot of the people that were there in its original form have to move through it. They have to be gone, really, for change to actually happen. Do you believe that is the case, and do you believe that has begun or is well underway happening within the army?
Yeah, change is happening as far as the women are being allowed to get into any unit within the Irish Defence Forces. But as far as the culture change is concerned, it's very, very slow in changing. And I'm calling upon the Chief of Staff to really pay attention to the action and accountability, especially accountability, because it's just not happening. In the last 5 years, men have been found guilty of various sexual assaults, and they're still serving. I mean, these people shouldn't be serving. They have to take a leaf out of the Canadian Armed Forces and just discharge these people, because those victims are still walking around, and they can see these perpetrators walking around in the same barracks. Like, how difficult and how emotionally and mentally distraught is that for the victims?
Also, I presume this is of the army, in that, we'll sort it out amongst ourselves here. You know what I mean? There's a kinship, or however you might describe it. There's a loyalty. Maybe some might see you as being disloyal to the uniform or what have you. Is there an element of that still, even perhaps with soldiers that agree with everything that you've said and everywhere the army needs to be, but they might say, well, listen, let's not wash our dirty linen in public. We'll sort it out amongst ourselves. Does that persist?
Yes, it's actually up on veterans' Facebook pages at the moment. This woman is being disloyal and a disgrace to the uniform. But I don't feel that way. That was only one person, and I dismissed it straight away. But I'm not being a disgrace to the uniform, as I said. I'm not being disloyal. I'm pointing out injustices that are happening within the organisation. And the organisation has the power to change that. Even if they want to continue to do it within the inner sanctuary of the organisation, fair enough. But they must make serious efforts to bring about accountability.
Yeah, and just running through what's sent out from the publishers, and a lot of it highlights, awful experiences that you went through. But there's more to this story, perhaps, even than's on this sheet of paper. So, it's a remarkable story. You're a trailblazer. Many firsts, despite, incredible pushback and awful experiences. So talk to me how you want the reader to read this book, what you see this book as from front to back, beyond maybe what would be seen as, and I don't want to diminish it in describing these, but, the headline things that have been highlighted in this piece of paper. I want you, in your words, what the story is and how you want the reader to consume it.
Yeah. Well, of course, the blur at the back of the book is sensationalized. None of my experiences have been exaggerated or enhanced. They're all true. But I would like people to read it as a historic book. Again, as I said, I was one of the first 38 women. And to look at the historic significance of that, and to look at how I and all the other females had power through. Like, for the first 10 years, the public had no idea that the government brought in female cadets every single year since 1980, but the government only allowed us to join as one recruit platoon in 1981. And the next female recruit platoon did not come in until 1990. So we were walking around, I know I've been quoted by this, we were walking around barracks for 10 years like unicorns. There was only 8 in each barracks, or 8 in each command. That's among 5,000 men at that time. To look at upon that, how vulnerable we felt, how sometimes men felt embarrassed to be in our company, how we felt embarrassed to be in their company, because they just didn't know how to treat us. A classic example would be when I was having my orientation through Army Headquarters, first female to go in Army Headquarters, and a junior officer was showing me around, and we stood at one of their massive big doors, and they said, "Oh, we have a problem here at Private Noy, because normally we're officers and gentlemen, so we're going to open the door for a female coming through, but now we have this dilemma." And I said, "Well, what's the dilemma?" I said, "I'm a private, you're an officer, so I'm going to open the door for you." You know, silly little innuendos and situations like that we had to deal with for 10 years. Like, it was ridiculous.
Unbelievable. Were we outliers in the period of your career in terms of how women were treated in the army? Like, I mean, was it very different here? Are we a generation or two generations behind what might happen in other similar countries? Or through you telling your stories, have you learned that it's reflected in France or Germany or Britain or America? Or
yeah, I have to say that during our training and afterwards, because I was very, very passionate about the military and how other women were getting on in other militaries, I have to say that the Irish Defence Force were actually well advanced during our training, because we got weapons training, and to my horror, a few years later, when I was doing research, I discovered that the British Army and the Women's Service Corps, they didn't do weapons training until about 6 years after we did ours. So we were quite advanced in that way to allow us to have full weapons training. But in another sense, you know, we passed out as 3 stars, and for the male recruits to get to 3 stars, they had to go back and do an extra 6 weeks training. Whereas in our training, they combined those 6 weeks into 2 weeks. They removed all the tactical training, and all we did was learn how to address envelopes, type letters, and how to answer the phone. So there's the two sort of opposites. Like, we were allowed to do weapons training, but then they stopped us to do advanced tactics. No, you'll go into the office and learn how to answer the phone and write letters.
I mean, I wonder, a lot of this comes down to leadership. If there were, you know, if things had been put in place properly from the get-go, presumably that would have trickled down. Do you know what I mean? This, you know, I mean, I think there's a big challenge for leadership in relation to what they were doing. Listen, one other question I wanted to ask you as well. A young person reading this book, what do you think they might take from it? You know, someone on the start of their career, not necessarily in the army, but anywhere, because an awful lot, some of this in very different ways is replicated in many different industries as well, and that's only being addressed now too. I mean, even this morning, we're hearing of female representation in farming groups, for example, even though many women are farmers, but they aren't represented, and moves to try and address that. So this is happening all the while. But what do you think a 18, 19, 20-year-old woman or person, for that matter, would take from your book? Do you think they'd be inspired by it, discouraged, invigorated? I don't know.
Well, I'm hoping that they will be inspired. Because I did stay, and I did hope I did make a difference for the females coming behind me. So I would say to any woman going into any organisation, read your HR rights and dignity charters if they have it, and don't be afraid to speak up and tell straight away, well, no, I feel that that's inappropriate behaviour.
Speak up. It's so important, yeah.
Not just banter.
Yeah. Right, listen, it's been lovely speaking to you again. The best of luck with your book, A Woman in Defence, A Soldier's Story for the Enemy Within the Irish Army. It's about Carina Malloy, written with Catherine Rogers, and it's published by Hatchet Ireland. I presume available online and in all good and maybe even not the good ones, bookshops. Okay, lovely.
Hopefully, yes.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much. Take care of yourself. It's been lovely speaking to you. Thank you. Okay, right. So households are to get a refund after the ESB overcharged for big business subsidy. Caroline O'Doherty is the environment correspondent with the Irish Independent. Is going to tell us a bit more about that. Free money, Caroline. How did this all come about, and good morning to you?
Good morning. Well, I'm going to take you on a brief little history tour back to 2009. Obviously, we're in a recession, and the government is trying to do something to ease the burden on our big businesses for fear they'll all flee the country and even cause more economic harm that's already been caused. And they look at the energy bills, the electricity costs for big companies here, and they say one of the things that companies are complaining about is that our electricity costs are higher than in other parts of Europe. So the government comes up with an idea of how to sort of ease the burden on big businesses. And the idea they came up with was, well, look at, as part of your ESB bill, your electricity bill, you pay for how much electricity you use, but you also pay just charges regardless of how much electricity you use. And some of those charges there's levies and there's different charges, standing charges, there's network charges. And they decided, well, we could lessen the network charges for what they call large energy users, of which there's roughly about 1,500 in the country, big manufacturing plants, big IT plants, data centres, pharmaceutical companies, all of those. And we could put that take that cost off them and put it on to domestic customers, so householders, about 2.1 million of them in the country. And that's what they did. And they said, we'll take about €50 million a year off the cost of the big businesses and put that on the bills of ordinary people.
I love the name of it too, the large energy user rebalancing subvention.
Yeah, and that gives you an idea why, like, even though they didn't exactly hide it, it gives you an idea why it didn't come into popular discussion, because it just sounds like a technicality. Nobody really understood it. It sounded quite abstract, and it came into effect in 2010. And even though it was kind of introduced at this time of economic crisis, it stayed in effect every year up till October of last year. So that was kind of bad enough to sort of discover that. We reported on it last year, and a lot of people raised eyebrows. Said, well, I never heard of this. Why didn't I hear about this? And I said, well, again, the name, the technicality of it, it happens. A lot of these charges and things in the energy system work behind the scenes, and people only know when they get their bill in their hand. They look at the bottom line, and that's kind of the only thing that gets people's attention. But what has been discovered since is that not only were they taking 50 million a year, the people in charge of, if you like, switching the money between the burdens of the costs between big businesses and domestic customers was EirGrid, which runs the national electricity grid, and ESB Networks, which brings it sort of closer to local transmission, if you like. EirGrid did it as they were supposed to do it. ESB Networks applied this subvention, this rebalancing, incorrectly, and they actually took more from domestic householders and gave more, if you like, off the bills of the big businesses than they were supposed to. Now, yeah.
No,
take a breath.
No, Caroline, you're doing brilliant as always, and thank you so much. So it's not that we're getting it all back. We're getting the stuff back that was overcharged to us. Is this going to? Are they going to pay this back to us out of our money effectively, or are they going to try and claw this back from the big businesses? That would be a nightmare, I'd imagine.
Well, this is the question now. Look, even up to last night, we had a struggle to get. Well, look, roughly how much do you think you overcharged? And this was discovered in March of last year. It only became somewhat acknowledged in letters in November last year, and the energy regulator, who's in charge of all the energy companies and making sure they stay in line and all the rest, was insisting still yesterday before an Oireachtas committee of TDs and senators to whom they are answerable that they didn't have the figure and wouldn't have the figure, and they'd start looking at the figure as part of a kind of an annual trawl of figures in April this year. Eventually, we kind of managed to hammer it out of the ESB last night that they reckon probably it was a few euro every year, and so it comes up to possibly about €50 on each household, and that money is to come back. Now, bear in mind, each household probably subvented and rebalanced unknowingly about €500 or so over that period of time to big companies. So maybe about €50. Now, that's the question. Who does it come back from? Because ESB Networks didn't actually get this money for themselves. They kind of took it, if you can imagine, they're the middleman. They took it off domestic customers and paid and gave it off the bills of the big businesses. So essentially, who benefited? big businesses. The chances of them paying that back with a smile on their face, I think, was very, very slim. So that's the interesting thing. Who pays? Because if you say, well, look, ESB Networks, you made the mistake, you've got to pay it back. Well, that's actually our money, because ESB Networks gets its money from the public. So there's a little point to people
Caroline,
really
you're going to have to make sure now that we don't end up getting this back and then having to pay it back, because it would be ridiculous. We need to find out how they're going to fund this, and if they're not going to try and claw it back off us again, if they end up having to pay it out of their own coffers. And when you said a little earlier on about you discovering the existence of this subvention, and it kind of was, as you said, it was running there for 12 years. It wasn't just us, like the likes of me or you, that weren't really aware of this. I would say this subvention came as a surprise to an awful lot of people, that it was just sitting there on people's bills. You know, higher ups, people that should know.
Absolutely. When I started asking questions about it, it kind of came to light when the energy regulator decided to discontinue it last year. And the documentation, they were doing a lot of work on, looking at the energy crisis and what makes up the kind of various charges that householders face. And it was in this kind of obscure line. And, I looked at it and said, well, what is that they're discontinuing? Now, I have to say, in discontinuing it, they actually added a new levy on to householders. So even in discontinuing it, we're not benefiting from it. We gained by about €40 and we lost by about €41. So that's another side to it. But anyway, at least they've discontinued it. But, when I started asking questions, I found myself having to explain to people what it was, people in departments and people in state agencies, because they didn't seem to be aware of it. The government, when they agreed it in 2009 for implementation from 2010, that government was gone sort of the next year. But here's a really interesting thing, and something I didn't realise at the time, because it was framed as a kind of an emergency measure and big businesses are in trouble and we've got to keep them in the country and all that kind of thing. But Lynn Boylan, the Sinn Féin senator, I followed up on my story, and she got some Freedom of Information documents in the last couple of weeks there. And one of the documents actually shows that the government at the time described it as a permanent measure. So even though there was very little discussion about it when it was brought in, that little discussion was based on, it's a crisis time and we got to do something to help big businesses. But it turns out it was intended to be a permanent measure. So that also raises questions, because why would you permanently subsidise, prop up, cut the bills off big businesses, however you want to term it, at the cost and expense of householders? There's still an awful lot of questions.
And in those documents, Caroline, maybe that doesn't have to be, what were we getting in return? I mean, I wonder what kind of commitments big business or whomever was negotiating on their behalf, like what kind of a commitment did they give in return? Did they say, well, look, if it keeps us in the country, it does, that's fine? Or did they give a commitment beyond that? And did they lobby for it to be in place permanently? And what were they bringing to the table, I wonder?
Well, we get an inkling of that more from the documentation that's publicly available, although when I say publicly available, it's within a very convoluted system of papers in the Energy Regulator's website. Last year, when the Energy Regulator said, we're going to discontinue this, there were letters from big businesses, some of them possibly in existence from the original implementation of this rebalancing subvention, and probably some of them new, and they complained and said, no, please don't do this. But also the Department of Enterprise said, don't do this. Why are you doing this? Have you checked the impact? So we can absolutely sure when the decision was taken in 2009, the impetus kind of came from the Department of Enterprise at the time. It was a cabinet decision. Now it was implemented through the Department of Energy, which was the Energy Minister at the time was Eamon Ryan. He actually once again now has the energy portfolio as Minister for the Environment. The energy portfolio has moved around. So we've been sort of attempting to get his take on what happened at the time, because it did come through his department. But in those Freedom of Information documents, as so often happens, you see a lot of it is redacted, in other words, blacked out, and including some intriguing paragraphs which are headed ministerial observations. So we haven't quite got out of them. Well, what were your observations at the time? Did you object to this? Did you? So we're hoping to still find out what his thoughts were at the time, and did he really intend this to be permanent and ongoing long after the crisis, and also there's questions for the Energy Regulator. How come they didn't spot that ESB networks were wrongly applying it. They just used a different system of applying it. It was meant to be a set figure every year. They used some percentage figure, and as the percentage grew over the years. So as the energy regulator is supposed to be the oversight body, there's questions there. Well, were they just sort of ticking the box saying, well, that's been done again this year, and not actually looking at the figures involved.
And if we do get €50 back, we're not going to be able to go out and buy ourselves a kebab or something with it. It'll just be a credit against our...
Presumably, and I know people say it's
we're
only €50.
compelled to spend
so
the €50 on electricity rather than something nice.
Possibly. But it's when you accumulate it over the 10 years. If it's €50 per household, and we by 2.1 million households, that's €100 million extra that went into companies' pockets at a time when households
were struggling.
In the year.
We were all, that was 2009,
2009, 2010. Until about 2011, about 20,000 disconnections of electricity customers in a year. It was a period of grave hardship for customers, for households. But big businesses were the ones getting the assistance. Just there was one justification, and I'll just say it because this will make people's ears, go red. And there was a discussion that because the energy market was opening up, so you basically at the time you had ESB, and now of course we have Pinergy and SSE Electricity and Flow Gas, and about 10 or 11 different electricity companies. They said, well, these new companies are all coming in now. The marketing is opening up. There will be competition. So, prices for householders will probably come down, and people will be able to get better value if they shop around. I think over the years, I'm not sure how much of that actually, even though there is more competition as such, I'm not sure how much that actually played into lower prices over the years.
I don't think it ever came to pass, and my ears are bright red with rage. Listen, thank you as always, Caroline. I appreciate your time. Take care of yourself.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye. That's Caroline O'Doherty, environment correspondent with the Irish Independent, with some good news, potentially. But it's good news off the back of, really bad news, I suppose, as Caroline's been outlining there, this levy being introduced, just sitting there. No one really knew it was there as such until it was discovered last year. But it could lead to €50 off your electricity, which is better than nothing, I suppose. But again, thanks to Caroline for that info.
Watch the show live now on YouTube, Facebook, and at highlandradio.com.
The 9 till Noon Show, brought to you by Bluebird Care, providing nurse-led home care services in Donegal. Call Bluebird Care 912-9562 and bring care home.
Kilross Boarding Kennels Ballybuffet are delighted to announce the opening of their brand new cattery alongside their boarding kennels. The perfect stay for your dog or cat. Dogs must be vaccinated, including kennel cough, and cats must be fully vaccinated. Kilross Boarding Kennels and Cattery, 086 357 2769.
At Ulster Bank, our team is continuing to close current and deposit accounts, along with some of our branches. At this time, if your notice period and your deadline has passed, your account is now queued for closure. All personal and business account deadlines are fast approaching. You must take urgent action. If you are still relying on your bank account and in need of more support, please contact us immediately. Visit ulsterbank.ie, your local branch, or call 0818 210 260. Call costs may vary and calls from mobiles may not be free. Ulster Bank Ireland DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
All right, you remember last month we were speaking about a number of council houses that were given to tenants, but they weren't living in them. And in some cases, actually, and I think it was the exception rather than the rule, some of these houses ended up on Airbnb. So for whatever reason, someone was on a housing waiting list, they were given a house, but they were not living in it. So we were speaking at that time to Councillor Micheál Colm Magella Asbeg, and he's back on the show with us again this morning. Magin Y. Micheál, thank you very much for joining us. Good to have you on the show.
Magin White, Greg, could you
Right, so we have a figure here now, upwards of 100, maybe even 150 houses that have been given to people but aren't being lived in. Is that an accurate estimate?
Well, I suppose it's very difficult at the moment to put an exact figure on it. I know that some of the areas are looking hugely into this here. They're putting a lot of time and energy in it, and I'd like to take the opportunity, because I'm often on radio here schooling the council But I'd like to take this opportunity to praise the staff in the housing section, and especially in my own area of the Glenties Municipal District area, and the work and effort and energy that they're putting into this here. But yeah, we need to look at what figure we're talking about here. If you look at the Glenties, there's another 4 municipal district area within the county. There's 5 all in. Whereas one of the smaller populated areas within the council area. There's a huge population, obviously, in towns like Ballyshannon, Ballygunningal, Bundoran, Kilkenny. So, we expect the figures to be obviously a lot higher in them areas. So what I've done here is look, I've been tacking back and forth with the council in relation to this here. I've also, and I'd like to again to take the opportunity as well to thank Thomas Pringle. I've requested that this would be raised in Leinster House with the Minister to actually commission a report into this year right across the whole Free State in terms of how many of these houses are vacant right across the council.
Well, let's talk about Donegal for a second. There's a figure of 100 to 150, an estimate there. Now, we're not saying that's exactly what it is. It's an estimate. Is that county-wide or in your municipal district?
Oh, no. This is only a rough estimate that I reckon that's possible.
Across the county, though?
That's across the county, where we've seen... and the other areas, because I do talk to other council staff in different areas. As you know, I'm very passionate about housing. It's really important that we're on top of this here. We're in a housing crisis caused by government and their policy of capitalism. And for me, it's important that we start building. But the concept and idea that people have council houses, that they're living somewhere else, and isn't morally right. It's not right when we see people who not alone who are just homeless, but who are on waiting list for many, many years, either with children or not, or on their own, or with partners. But the idea that somebody then would go a step further and rent out the house to somebody else long term, or even worse again, we've seen some evidence in terms of renting out to Airbnb. That is absolutely not acceptable in any shape or form. And I would call on the community, if not, certainly get in contact with the council, and if this has been ignored...
So just go back there, go back there, because the one second, Micheál, because the line broke down there. What are you saying? What are you? That's okay, no problem. What are you saying to the public?
Well, what I'm saying to the public is if look, if I was in a situation where I was homeless, if I was in a situation that I had kids and I'm on the waiting list and I'm being turfed out of a house in the coming weeks when the ban is lifted in early April, and I know that Johnny or Mary or whoever lives up the road who has a council house but aren't living in it, I'd be going absolutely apeshit. I'd be going really, really angry about it. I'd be protesting outside the council office about it, and it's not acceptable. And anybody who is doing this, they're actually withholding a house of their own community. That is what's happening here.
So you're saying, to the public, if you're aware of this happening, report it to the council?
Yeah, of course, of course. And like I said, nobody wants to be snitching on neighbours or any community. Absolutely not. But we're in a crisis here. Look, I work with people who are homeless. As you know, I've spoke many a time on Highland Radio on it. Look, I've experienced homelessness myself in England and a number of places in Ireland. And it's something that I'm passionate about. And nobody should be waiting the length of time that we are. But unfortunately, due to the capitalist society that we live in and the government's policy and support for that there, we're not building the houses. So the houses that we have built and the houses that we've allocated should be lived. Those who have been allocated these houses should be living in it, not somewhere else.
So what do you want the council to do as well? I mean, what commitment have they given to you to audit their stock and see, what houses are being lived in and which houses are not? Like, what have you received any commitment from housing? And if not, what are you seeking from them?
Well, look, what's happening now is that I know that in our own Glenties Municipal District that we're looking into this. There's a lot of resources and time that could be spent somewhere else, because we are looking to develop housing estates in Gweedore and Hohenlia. There's other places we're looking at, like Doohery and Fulcara and Alchahar, and that's where the resources need to be in building houses. Not time wasting here, where people think it's okay to have a council house and rent it out. Now, either if they're living here or not, because there's possibly circumstances where people have emigrated to find work, and it's unfortunate that people have to emigrate. But while they're away, they're renting out their house.
And do you know what? There's a real irony here in that it's very possible that a number of the people that are renting these houses are themselves actually on the housing waiting list.
Yeah, well,
which is crazy.
Absolutely.
Like they're themselves waiting for council property, but they're renting council property off a landlord who is a council tenant. I mean, it's
that's possible, and that's very, very possible. And look, and I know that people need to do what they need to do, but for me, the idea that we're just taking advantage of the system in this way, I cannot stay silent on it. I can't turn a blind eye on it. I just think that something has to be done. So what's going to be interesting now is it's going to be interesting to see, obviously, the council and how quick they respond to this, and quick that they can identify, because it's not an easy task without a shadow of a doubt. And again, unfortunately, here we are having a situation where it has taken up a lot of time of staff, and staff, instead of investing into more staff, which we need doing, we're taking up more time into looking into this. But again, it'll be really interesting what the minister does, what the minister's response will be. And I would appeal to anybody that isn't living in their own home, that's been allocated to them by taxpayers, by the community, through the council. If you're not, hand back your keys. Don't.
I wonder how often that actually happens.
Thinking you're going to get away with this here. No, well, some people have. Some people have been contacted and they have handed back the keys. But the idea that you're going to fight this here and try to hoodwink your community, because that's what it is. These houses belong to us as people. They're only managed by the council on our behalf, and it's taken from the community itself. Hand back the keys. Do the right thing.
Okay, we'll see where the story goes from here. A national audit would be very, very interesting. If we have 150 houses here, for example,
we don't know the figures
well, let's just suggest it could be that. You multiply that across the 26 counties, and then you match that to the homelessness problem that we have, and you can see that the figures could be quite close there.
It's going to be high. I expect it to be high figures, absolutely. Look, housing is such a big issue for a lot of families now. I know families or individuals who have absolutely want to live here, who have work here, but they know they could never afford to build a house here. They know they can't get to rent a house here. They know that the council list is like years down the road. So they leave, they emigrate to foreign countries, need that be Abu Dhabi, Australia, and unfortunately become Irish immigrants abroad. And with all the difficulties being an Irish immigrant abroad brings as well, it's just absolutely crazy. We can house everybody. And I mean, I'm using the word deliberately, everybody. We can house everybody here. But unfortunately, due to the neoliberal capitalist agenda of the Dublin government, this is why we're in the state we're in.
All right, I think you have another call coming in there.
We definitely need a progressive government.
All right, listen, thanks for your time this morning. That was Micheál Colin McGill-Naspa, Councillor, Independent Councillor there. What are your views on that? 08660 25,000. He quite strong in his comments there. A caller says there are now 375,000 vehicles on Irish roads without a valid NCT cert. Is it any wonder with the state of our roads? That's not the problem, but they're interconnected, I suppose. One of the reasons why the NCT is so packed is because some people are booking NCT appointments and then selling them on for profit. It's a massive thing among the car selling community in Donegal. Does that happen? I imagine there are companies that import cars. They seem to get NCTs really quite quickly. I'm not saying they're buying. I don't know what's going on. I'm not suggesting there's any impropriety there. But have you ever been offered for sale an NCT slot? Please let us know. It's an important question. 086 60 25,000. 086 60 25,000. Back after the news and obituary notices.
Do Good Station. Bluebird Care are hiring nurses and carers across Donegal. Call 912 9562. Bluebird Care are sponsors of today's show.
There's never been a better time to go full Lidl. Let's hear it from our customers.
It's great value for money, and it's first and foremost.
Anyone that has a big family, they should be shopping in Lidl, without a doubt. Do you have a holiday at the end of the year?
Go on, go full Lidl today.
Highland Radio weather updates with Ireland West Airport. Thinking of a sun holiday this summer with the family? Fly to Alicante, Malaga, Faro, Lanzarote, Majorca and Milan with Ryanair. Ireland West Airport. Don't just take off, take it easy. The 9 till Noon Show with Bluebird Care, providing home care services for all ages in Donegal. Visit bluebirdcare.ie and bring care home.
Wet n Wild is celebrating 20 years in business with a massive 20% off absolutely every product in store in February. Choose any top outdoor brand product in store and we will deduct 20% of all prices at the till. Buy premium quality outdoor clothing, footwear and equipment today and save 20%.
Like to eat well all week at amazing Aldi prices? I like the sound of that. Feed your family for €5 with a delicious chicken casserole. And from February 2nd, enjoy Super 6 fresh meat offers, like specially selected Irish Angus steak mince 5% fat, now only $3.99. And try our Aldi Savers offers, like Mamiya mini size 2 nappies 60 pack, save 32%, now only $1.79. I don't like it, I love it. Aldi, every day amazing.
Live, on air, online and on the Highland Radio app. This is Highland Radio News.
Good morning, it's Donna Marie Doherty with the 10 o'clock news. It's claimed over 100 council houses in Donegal, while rented out, are not being lived in. It's believed in some instances some social homes are being listed on Airbnb or rented out to someone else. Councillor Michael Collum Magilla Asbog told today's 9 to Noon show that it is totally unacceptable at a time when Donegal is crying out for housing.
The concept and idea that people have council houses, that they're living somewhere else, and isn't morally right. It's not right when we see people who not alone who are just homeless, but who are on waiting list for many, many years, either with children or not, or on their own, or with partners. But the idea that somebody then would go a step further and rent out the house to somebody else long term, that is absolutely not acceptable.
When we look at people with profound mental health difficulties across Donegal and across the country,
A Donegal deputy says it's imperative for mental health services for children and young people in Donegal are properly resourced, fully staffed and provide the support when and where needed. Sinn Féin brought forward a motion in the Dáil last evening on the back of a serious concerns over patients currently accessing child and adolescent mental health services in Ireland. Deputy Patrick McLaughlin says it's clear the process in place is not fit for purpose. He says there needs to be a more complete overhaul in the CAMS model.
When we look at people with profound mental health difficulties across Donegal and across the country, they start often in the teenage years. So it's critical that there's an intervention, there's a support immediately. That means resourcing mental health services properly and not relying, as we do in Donegal, on the goodwill and good hearts of the voluntary sector.
The Public Accounts Committee will meet today to discuss an alleged failure to provide payouts to families who were illegally charged for nursing home stays. Opposition parties want the government to release the documents associated to a so-called secret strategy. It's been reported to the current members of government were aware of the practice, but a spokesperson says the story has been misrepresented. Brian Stanley, chair of the Oireachtas Public Accounts Committee, says plenty of questions need answering.
We will want to know the legal position. We will want to know how this developed, who was involved. We'll be looking for all papers regarding this. We have the power to send for papers and all information, all documents. We'll be looking for those, I suspect, by the time the meeting is over today. And we'll also want to know who was involved and how this actually came about.
Donegal County councillors have passed a motion opposing the granting of licences for prospecting anywhere in Donegal. Councillor Michael McMahon told members this week a strong resolution has been passed by the Leitrim County Council, and he believes Donegal must follow suit to protect its clean waters and reputation as a tourist destination. Officials noted the motion and pointed out that even if a licence is approved by the Minister, planning applications must be submitted and assessed in the usual way. Councillor McMahon says Donegal has a lot to lose.
We have been bombarded with prospectors who have no respect and have no regard on anybody. We're a tourist area, we're a tourist county, and in the water, the environment, and we hear all this talk about the environment. I'm starting to be very worried about the environment. I'm very worried about the chemicals these people bring with them, and also the way they treat residents, the way they treat farmers, and the way they treat the general public.
A tidal wave of evictions is likely to happen if the government decides to lift the current ban in place. That's the view of the People Before Profit TD Paul Murphy, who says although homelessness is at an all-time high, the rate of increase has slowed since its introduction. Taoiseach Leo Varadkar told the Dáil yesterday that a decision on cost of living supports will be made in mid-February. Deputy Murphy says the eviction ban cannot go if the government wants to address this incredible national scandal.
We now have 11,500 people homeless. It is, an incredible national scandal. If you trace the evolution of the figures of the number of people homeless, the winter ban has been imposed and the rate of increase has substantially slowed as a consequence. If what is the partial eviction ban is lifted on the 1st of April, we're going to see a further tidal wave of evictions.
Now for weather, a mix of sunny spells and scattered showers today. Breezy with highest temperatures of 7 to 9 degrees. That's all for now. We'll be back again with headlines at 11 o'clock. The obituary notices this Wednesday morning, February 1st. The death has taken place of Anne Rogers, Nick Hannon, Johnstone, Scotland, and formerly of Farragon's Lettermacca Ward. Funeral Mass at St Aidan's Church, Johnstone at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning. Funeral Mass may be viewed on the church's live stream. The death has occurred of Ailish Tinney, formerly of Donamore House, Donamore Castlefin, and recently of Tonragee, Ballyshannon. Her remains are reposing at St Mary's Church, Castlefin. Funeral Mass today at 12 noon with burial immediately afterwards in the adjoining cemetery. For more details, including any family health guidelines for wakes and funerals, please go to highlandradio.com.
Highland Radio.
At Ulster Bank, our team is continuing to close current and deposit accounts, along with some of our branches. At this time, if your notice period and your deadline has passed, your account is now queued for closure. All personal and business account deadlines are fast approaching. You must take urgent action. If you are still relying on your bank account and in need of more support, please contact us immediately. Visit ulsterbank.ie, your local branch, or call 0818 210 260. Call costs may vary and calls from mobiles may not be free. Ulster Bank Ireland DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
The county's #1 talk show, the 9 till noon show on Highland Radio.
Okay, welcome back to the programme. Good morning. If you're after joining us, it's 7 minutes past 10 on this Wednesday, the 1st of February. Thank you so much for listening to the show and for calling and texting in. Here are some of your comments so far. Why can they not send someone out to check the people in the houses every 2 months, same as social welfare does their checking? I suppose they could just say, well, I wasn't in when you called. It would take multiple visits, and you could on multiple occasions you could argue that, I was out doing this, or I was over visiting, or I was out on the farm, or whatever it might be. So I'm not sure that would achieve the goal. It would take an awful lot of manpower, let me put it like that, but I'm not quite sure it would fix the problem. Another caller says the council is correct regarding houses not being occupied. Letterkenny tenant worked abroad and rented the house to another family. Another well-said Micheál column. Lots of you texting in on that. Different issues here too. The quickest way to get an NCT date is to ring up. I got mine within 10 days of ringing. Well, that's a systems failure though, isn't it? Because we're being pushed online and we trust that system. But as that listener says, ring them up. You're better off doing it that way. We closed our Ulster Bank accounts over 3 weeks ago. We're still waiting to see our money transferred to our new bank. We cannot contact Ulster Bank. Has any other listeners experienced this? I would be worried about that. It shouldn't take 3 weeks for the money to be transferred. And presumably you no longer have access to your Ulster Bank accounts to see if it's still there. Maybe that's an understandable period of time. Normally, for me, it was a working day. So 3 weeks I would see as troubling. But so can anyone out there help? This listener closed their Ulster Bank account 3 weeks ago, transferred their money into a new account, but the money has yet to arrive in the new account. Or maybe you have a contact number for the Ulster Bank that still works and they can chase it up there. Greg, listeners should be made aware of the enormous charges being made by ATM owners when withdrawing foreign currency. On Sunday last, I wanted to withdraw £10 sterling from an ATM in Strabane. I was astounded to find that £10 cost me €18.12. This extortionate rate should be illegal and the operators should be subject to some sort of regulation and control. I should point out that this ATM is not owned by any bank. It's a privately owned machine. Customers would be better off going to a bank or opt for cash back from a shop. I attach a photo of the transaction, which they did. I don't have it, but Caroline's looked over it. Needless to say, I cancelled the transaction. Wow. £10 costing €18.12 in Strabane. Would you ever have imagined that could be the case? Another caller says, there are so many older people living in bigger houses which they no longer need. I'm one of them. I've tried to get into sheltered accommodation because for me it would be company, security and lesser bills. Can anyone point me in the right direction to do this? And you're not the first person that's contacted us on this matter. We had a couple of callers going back a couple of years ago now. Older people, as they described themselves, living in 4 or 5 bedroomed houses. They no longer needed and were hard for them to maintain. They wanted, and I think at the time they suggested maybe the council could work with them to take over their houses and to provide them with a 1 or 2 bed bungalow or a different type of accommodation, and they had no success in that regard either. Now, I'm not quite sure what sheltered accommodation is, but this listener is looking for that. Anyone got any advice in relation to that? Right. Is this €50 Caroline mentioned, along with the 50 out of profits that the ESB feels sorry for us? And her Indo colleague Charlie Weston had said it's criminal. They even increased the PSO levy that they didn't have to, but they did. As who's going to stop them? I don't know. That's from Kevin. I don't know if it's the same 50. This is an overcharge. I think it's a different one. A caller says 98 of combat fatalities are male. Timed armed forces adopt a policy of equal gender quotas for frontline troops, or do women only want that sort of equality in politics in the boardroom? And last one before we take a break. Greg, there is no crowd in this country as bad as Electric Ireland. In 10 years' time, someone like Caroline will uncover the complete scam that's taken place last year with regards to prices. I have a small business, and in one 2-month bill, I have 3 different prices per unit, ranging from 31 cent to 66 cents. Now, it's challenging enough in business without having to deal with that. It seems to be, and I've said this before in this programme, that your ESB bill can just be random. It can be a minefield. It can be guessed. Then you can send in the actual readings and it can go up, it can go down. We don't really know. You shop around, but you're told on the website, well, your bill this year is going to be £2,000. Switch here and it'll be £1,200. There's no real explanation. I find it really quite confusing. And certainly from a business perspective, to have 3 different unit prices on the one bill is really quite remarkable. A caller says, every planning permission for change of use is to people creating flats. Soon there'll be nothing left in the country but quick buck apartments. Is this really what we want for this county? Well, what do you want instead? We need accommodation. People have nowhere to live. But tell us a bit more to your comment there. How many government scandals we have seen now that Leo Varadkar knew nothing about? We are all fools, believes that listener. All right, good luck if you're playing the bingo today. Here are the numbers.
It's time for NCBI Bingo on Highland Radio.
It's Wednesday, the 1st of February. You're playing on the blue sheet. The reference number is S3. It's game number 5. The numbers are 2, 44, 40, 9, 82, 33, 64, 11, 89, and finally 47. Phone your claim to 9104833 before 8 tonight, leaving your name, contact number and the name of the shop where you purchased your book, and we'll call you back the next working day. Get all your NCBI bingo information at highlandradio.com.
Kilross Boarding Kennels Ballybuffet are delighted to announce the opening of their brand new cattery alongside their boarding kennels. The perfect stay for your dog or cat. Dogs must be vaccinated, including kennel cough, and cats must be fully vaccinated. Kilross Boarding Kennels and Cattery, 086 357 2769.
Wild Atlantic Way adventures await you this spring with a midweek escape to the luxury Radisson Blu Hotel and Spa Sligo from just €120 with complimentary breakfast each morning. Indulge in afternoon tea overlooking Sligo Bay. Unwind with a treatment at the spa. Enjoy a delicious meal in the brasserie. Sit back and relax in Waves Bar, or surround yourself with the best of Sligo's outdoor pursuits right on your doorstep. Book now at radsligo.com for the perfect spring midweek escape.
The 9 till Noon Show, brought to you by Bluebird Care, providing nurse-led home care services in Donegal. Call Bluebird Care 912-9562 and bring care home.
Okie dokie, very welcome back to the 9 till Noon Show. Me and Patricia McBride talking about something completely different there. Patricia, of course, Director of Hungarian on Theatre. Welcome to the programme. Good morning to you.
Thank you, Greg. Nice to see you.
You too. And we're talking about exciting times at Hungarian on Theatre in Letterkenny. 500,000. Is that right? Being spent, would you call it a facelift or an improvement or improvement works, or how would you describe it?
Well, improvement. It's 600 grand actually. We got 300,000 from the Department of Arts, and that is being matched by the Donegal County Council. So it's, you know, the building is nearly 25 years old, and one of the things that we have needed over the years is a workshop space, somewhere for rehearsals and somewhere for intimate performances. So this is an improvement to the building, as well as a refurbishment, I guess, because what we'll be doing is we'll be repurposing the upper foyer to make a studio space there, and that requires anybody that's familiar with the building will know that there are like 3 big voids in the first floor, 2 in the window and 1.
Like unused space?
Unused space, yeah.
Okay.
So the voids were originally for a public art commission, which never fully materialised. And so the benefits that we'll get from filling those in, and that makes it sound like very simple. You know, we don't have a full design solution yet, but when that area is filled in, we'll have much more floor space in the upper foyer. We'll create a workshop space, stroke intimate studio. But the benefits we'll get also is that we will have a much more energy efficient building. You know, the amount of heat that's lost through those voids at present is problematic.
And as you say, 20 years ago, things were very different, perhaps. You know, we went maybe for the aesthetics rather than the practicality of things at times.
Well, absolutely. And one of the other key elements of the refurbishment is an improvement is that we will redesign our box office. As you said, standards, you know, 20 odd years ago were different, and currently our box office and reception counter doesn't meet access standards for people who are wheelchair users, for example. It's very high. So, I mean, sadly, like the late Frank Larkin helped us prepare the application, and when he was sitting in his wheelchair at the counter, you literally couldn't see him, you know, from the seated position behind.
So in a way too, he will have influence on what is to part of his legacy, really. Will
Absolutely.
Have influence
Frank
on
helped
the
us with that.
Which I think is nice, actually. I think
it'll be lovely to see it come into fruition, because not only will it be a better space for customers, but the new design will allow us to actually employ someone who potentially who is a wheelchair user.
And this area upstairs that will be created, that you'll create the workshop from, just kind of interested because I'm not really, because I'm learning as much as anything. Smaller scale performances as well. You describe them as intimate performances. So is that sort of maybe a 1 or 2 person, and you have you could have a group of people standing around watching them. Is that
Yes,
what
that's
that
the
would
idea.
be? Okay, that'd be nice. Yeah.
I mean, I think it'll be used for workshops and rehearsals. I mean,
Primarily.
our own youth
Yeah.
theatre need a space to work, but a lot of community groups are looking for spaces. It's something that, you know, in terms of what's available throughout the town, there is a shortage of spaces for classes and workshops. So, but yeah, we do a lot of development work. So, for example, if we were doing a play reading of a new play, then we have potential. What our brief states is that we would like to have seating capacity for around 50 to 60 people for that kind of thing. So, you know, so it would be a very low tech, maybe poetry readings, very intimate, you know, music recital, that type of thing.
But more flexibility.
Yes.
Allows it the space to be used when it currently can't be really used effectively.
Exactly.
And also I read also proposals for a continental style dining area.
Yes, I mean that's it's kind of fortuitous. The two things are on track at the same time. But yeah, there's the Eat Out outdoor dining space, which will be a redevelopment of our outdoor plaza, and that's being led by the County Council. That is something that was funded by the Tourist Board, and again with match funding from the County Council. So that the idea there is to create a more, as you say, continental, you know, forget the weather.
I know, how do we describe it? I know what you mean, yeah.
But it's
you can eat outside.
You know where the theatre is
Yeah.
on the Lower Port Road. There are a lot of takeaway places. So it's to provide a facility for people to get their takeaway and come and sit in a nice surrounding.
And you know what? We get a few decent days, and it's quite sheltered up there as well. Do you know what I mean?
It is, absolutely. And the design concept for that is being finalised at present, but we'll also incorporate the ability to do outdoor performances there. So there are plans to have like a raised area, you know, kind of like a stage. So we've seen concepts, but the detailed designs are happening
I get the feeling
now.
you really want to move on with this as quickly as is possible without compromising anything in the process either. What now? The €600,000. That's not how much you're looking for someone to bid for this work either. I presume you want estimates, you want designs, and then that can be adjusted up and down if necessary.
Well, I mean, it's a public tender process, so we have put that in as the absolute maximum budget available. That deadline for submissions is the 7th of February.
Has there been a good interest?
There have been expressions of interest through the e-tenders webpage.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll get some good bids.
Yeah.
now.
And in terms of planning, you know, I mean, a lot of this is internal works. When you get the right crew for the job, it can be progressed quite quickly, can it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the work internally is refurbishment. And it isn't really encroaching on any new space or anything, so we don't actually need the full planning for that.
Brilliant.
Planning has already been approved for the outdoor space, so that's all
shovel
moving
ready,
on.
I think they call this type of a project.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you hope to have it done this year?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Great.
I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about the cost of construction and the difficulty of getting builders and all of that. So, but we're aiming to have it all done, both things done in tandem this year.
Great.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's an enhancement of a community resource, and you know, it'll make the theatre better. It'll energise that Lower Port Road area as well.
It's hard to believe it's 20 years old because, you know, looking at the building, it's from a design perspective externally, it stood the test of time well, hasn't it? It doesn't look out of place if it were built last month.
No, I think, you know, it was a very modern design at the time. Actually, Greg, it's 25 years next year. We'll be celebrating our anniversary in 2024. So, yeah.
That's kind of exciting.
It really has stood the test of time well.
Yeah, I think so.
But like all buildings need to be, you know, attended to and things break down.
But it's not just the physical that gets a rejuvenation. You know, it's the staff, it's the management, and then, of course, it allows a new breath of life through the building too with this new space upstairs.
Well, yeah, it'll allow us to do different kinds of programming from what we do currently. I mean, we do development work, we do small scale performances, but a 383-seat auditorium can be quite unforgiving for that kind of work, so it'll be fantastic to put that in a proper space.
Yeah.
And, you know, it will be a boost for staff as well, because these are projects that we've been talking about for a long time. We actually got the funding for the internal works in 2020. So given the pandemic, things have been very delayed. So we're really keen to get on with it and get it done this year.
All right, excellent stuff. And anything good coming up soon?
Yeah,
there's always something good coming up. It's just to set you up for a plug, really.
You're asking the wrong person if you want me to say anything different. We got a great weekend, actually, with 3 events in a row, all pretty much sold out this weekend. But yeah, we've got a great programme of comedy coming up. Neil Delamere this weekend, Dermot Whelan. There's a handful of tickets left for Dermot. We've got Colin Murphy, Jared Farrelly, Tommy Tiernan, already sold out, but we've got some brilliant drama as well. We've got The Abbey coming back to us with a new play by Molière and an adaptation by Frank McGuinness and directed by Katrina McLaughlin. So great Donegal connections with that project. But we've got Druid coming up very soon. They have an award-winning show called The Last Return, which got like 5-star reviews when it ran in the Dublin Theatre Festival and the Edinburgh Festival last year. And then we've got a lovely little play called Dante Dan, and it's a coming-of-age story set in the 1970s down in Cork.
We were speaking to one of the actors in that, and there's a connections to the Banshee of
Inisherin.
What do we call it? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
The
other great thing is Frank Kinnavan is coming back with his new play called King.
Yeah.
You know, people will know his plays Silent and Forgotten.
People like to perform there. It must have a good reputation. You know, obviously there's a commercial element to anything.
Well, yeah,
because it's a great venue in the Northwest. But it seems people like to go back to On Green On. They always talk of those that I interview that are coming back again. They genuinely seem to look forward to coming back and playing in that environment.
Well, the theatre itself is a beautiful physical space with a great sort of relationship between the stage and the auditorium. But actually, everybody raves about Donegal audiences as some of the warmest in the country. And, you know, I think it's a credit to the whole community that people like to come back to the theatre.
And I also think I often say it, but, you know, I think we're very lucky, even though I'm not exactly beating a path because for different reasons, babies and things, I wouldn't get as much as I would probably like to. But we're lucky in that we have a facility that brings acts and performances that you would travel to Belfast or somewhere else to see, or even up to Derry, but or down to Dublin or whatever, that they're brought closer to us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think really that's really quite important, because it gives people access to the arts without having to travel great distances in many cases.
Yeah, and I mean we offer a diverse programme with comedy, music, dance, drama, and there's so much local community work as well from the amateur companies. Like, what's really lovely this year is seeing all the schools back in the variety concerts, and we had an event just before Christmas called Constellations, which was a kind of a celebration of all the local talent, and it was great to see so many groups participating in that.
And what's the story in terms of plans for the quarter-century birthday? Are you going to go to town on that, or still working on it, or what?
Oh yeah, well, definitely still working on it, because at the minute I'm just trying to balance the programme against when the capital works might actually happen. I think we'll be thinking about it and planning, but certainly not announcing anything for a while.
Well, you could have worse problems to worry about, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Your programme and development and stuff. It's great. Okay, listen, thanks so much for calling in. And you don't really have an idea at this point when works might start, but you'll let us know and we'll let the listeners know.
We'll let you know. If everything goes to plan, we'll have a clear idea once we get the tenders in.
Excellent.
In early February.
All right, lovely stuff. Thank you. That's Patricia McBride, Director of On Green On Theatre in Letterkenny.
Watch the show live now on YouTube, Facebook and at highlandradio.com.
Bluebird Care are hiring nurses and carers across Donegal. Call 912 9562. Bluebird Care are sponsors of today's show.
There's a monster who lives down in the glen, as wide as a tree and as tall as 10 men. But he squashed himself into a teeny old car any time he had to travel somewhere quite far. One day the engine exploded with a cough and a puff, and he finally cried, "Enough is enough. I'll ask the credit union for an electric car loan. I can apply online from the comfort of home." Monster loans from the credit union. Imagine more. Loans are subject to approval. Terms and conditions apply. If you do not meet the repayments on your loan, your account will go into arrears. This may affect your credit rating, which may limit your ability to access credit in the future. Credit unions in the Republic of Ireland are regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Hello, thanks for waiting. Could you hold the line?
Yeah, no problem.
Now, how can I help you?
Hi, I'm looking to make some updates to my insurance policy.
Have you tried our online portal?
I thought it would be easier to call.
Yeah. No. You're going to have to log on to amend your policy. Thanks for calling.
No, wait. I don't know my password.
Get the feeling that your insurer doesn't want to talk to you? At Local Insurance, we understand your needs. Call today for a bespoke quote or find us online at localinsurance.ie. Local Insurance, we'll get you sorted. The Local Insurance Network DAC Trading's Local Insurance is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Local Insurance is a tied insurance intermediary of Acorn Brokerage Limited. Acorn Brokerage Limited trading as Acorn Insurance is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Stop Highland Radio are going to Scotland from Monday the 1st of May to Thursday the 4th of May with the very best of music, and we would love for you to join us. Staying at the 4-star Crown Plaza Hotel in Glasgow, we are bringing with us some of the biggest country stars, including myself, David James, Declan Ernie and Robert Mazzell, to name a few. You will enjoy luxury travel to Glasgow, 3 nights dinner, bed and breakfast with music and entertainment each evening. Join us on the Highland Fling to Glasgow this May for only €575 per person. To book, call Highland Radio today on 074 91 25,000. Early booking is advisable. Single supplement applies.
Okay, you're welcome back to the programme. Now, as we were reading, Taoiseach Leo Varadkar yesterday said he must have been aware of a government plan to curb payment to families who were overcharged for nursing home care. And he doubled down on his defence amid an outcry yesterday, as he said medical card holders were not entitled to free nursing home care. I mean, that's obviously a significant scandal playing out in and of itself. But Pat O'Connor, policy specialist with Age Action, this is maybe a symptom, really, of our attitude and treatment to older generations. Is it that this would be seen as, and we don't know exactly what is to come, but that it would be seen as some way acceptable?
Well, this is a long-running saga, unfortunately. I mean, it starts in 1970 with the Health Act, which states quite clearly that someone with a medical card was entitled to free of charge nursing home care in public beds. And what happened from 1970 is that people, despite having a medical card, were charged. So this is known. Unfortunately, this is a scandal that went on for decades. Various court rulings ruled that this was illegal. It was known to be illegal within the department. And that saga continued all the way up to the 2000s, where there was a redress scheme, but it was quite narrow in its remit. And about 480 million was paid out to about 20,000 families affected. But it's clear that there was a couple of 100,000 other people affected by this over the decades who were in some way illegally charged for nursing home care. And the scandal here is really that this was known to the department. They had legal advice, there were court judgments, but that what was revealed last weekend is that there was a top secret legal strategy to frustrate this ever coming to court. And so what ministers have said in recent days quite accurately is that, you know, the state has never admitted that this people were entitled to free of charge care. But that's because it never got to court, because there were lots of settlements before court or before documents would be disclosed. So as a result, we've never had that sort of final legal clarity. And the net result is that many people paid for nursing home care and you know, had to perhaps sell their home or farm.
Well, that's it, because you've outlined it perfectly there as to what went on. But the impact it had on families, ironically, in a way, the person who needed the care was getting the care. But as you say, those around them, partners, husbands, wives, children, to provide that care that they received, they, in some cases, lost everything that they had earned, or, you know, that the person in care or the partner, that everything they'd accumulated their entire life had to be liquidated to pay for this care that they should have been receiving for free. I mean, the consequences are huge.
That's exactly it. And the Ombudsman wrote a report in 2010 with the rather apt title of "Who Cares?" ? And it detailed cases of individuals. So, for example, you could have a couple where one has gone into nursing home care and the spouse handed over most of their pension. And people were living on, what, today, 30, 40 euro a week, because all of the rest of the resources were being paid to afford nursing home care. In other cases, not only the person or the couple was assessed, but the wider family's means were assessed, and they were all to contribute money to pay for nursing home care. And this was happening outside of the legal structures, and that's the key thing. Now, the nursing home support scheme, the so-called Fair Deal scheme, comes in 2009, and it provides for a legal regime. But the net issue here is from 1970 through to 2009, these were unlawful charges, or at least there was a lot of legal questions that have never been satisfactorily answered. And many tens of thousands of families, you know, suffered privation, in some cases poverty, because they were paying for things. Whereas if somebody had legal advice, because they had the wherewithal to fight these charges, they weren't charged, sometimes for the sort of the same kind of bed as the person beside them. And that's, you know, the inequality or the injustice as part of this.
And just to imagine someone in care who themselves had worked really, really hard to leave something to their children, and then for them to be aware that, as I say, had to be liquidated or sold or lost effectively to pay for their care. Just how that, in some cases, perhaps their last months or years of their lives, the emotional impact that would have on someone at their end, you know, towards the end of their life. It's horrendous. And I think this needs to be out in the open. You know, we don't need cloak and dagger language, or I must have been told about it, but I don't remember being told about it. Do you know, I think this just needs to be a very open and honest, all cards on the table type of conversation going forward. I think people deserve that.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had these reports before. In 2005, we had the Travers report, which looked at the whole system. As I said, the Ombudsman report. And what we need is absolute clarity. And we need a process that people can have confidence in, that it's not just about who knew what and when, but it's that people can have confidence that there is a regime in place that is fair, that is balanced, and that, you know, is going to provide care for people. And yes, under the Fair Deal scheme, we have to pay for care. It's expensive, but that there's a fair system and there's a cap put on how much you have to pay. And that for people who were affected in the past, if there was an injustice, there needs to be some kind of remedy. Not necessarily a colossal compensation scheme, but recognition that it was wrong and a remedy put in place. So
the problem with that, though, Nat, is that, and listen, what you're saying is correct, but what is required for that to happen is either people currently making decisions, and some in different positions now that were in position in the early noughties, for example, to admit that they were complicit in this, or to suggest that they simply have no recollection of ever being told about it. That one of those two things has to happen before we arrive at a position whereby there is some sort of a redress. And I just see this process being frustrated to ensure that doesn't happen, because I can't historically remember where, you know, current decision makers were to put their hands up and say, look, we were part of this. It was wrong. We got it wrong. But now what we're going to do is provide such and such.
Well, I mean, there have been those moments, and you're right, we need it again, because it's exactly as you say, either the ministers knew and signed off on it, or else they did not know. And so you have to ask, why did senior officials not inform their ministers? And 2005 Travers report makes that point, that it does seem that officials withheld information from ministers or didn't fully brief them, or briefed them in a very scant way where things were brushed over, rather than the enormity of the decision being fully brought to the attention of the minister. And likewise, health officials in the past have briefed the advisor to the minister on the assumption that the minister would be briefed, but in the slew of information that always didn't happen. So there was a breakdown in the kind of the basic duty that ministers should be informed of these key decisions. And that's a governance issue that at the heart of the decision making.
But then there's all the nuances to this as well, because, you know, there are references to people saying this is a good strategy, it's working well, keep at it. There's an awful lot there. And I just can't imagine me sitting here and someone coming up to me and saying, by the way, we have a strategy, you know, just running this past you briefly, whereby, you know, we are frustrating people to the point whereby we know we owe them the money, but because they may not have the money to pursue this, they're not pursuing it. But if they do have the money to pursue it and we have to tell them what we know, well, then we're going to settle with them on the QT. I can't imagine me sitting here going, right, okay, keep at it, and then forgetting that conversation ever took place, because it's really, really quite significant. And we're talking billions here, and we know how we're reminded of the cost of the Mike redress scheme, for example, being far short of what this might have cost. I find it hard to believe that someone could be briefed on that and forget that.
Well, that's just it. And over the decades, advice was given again and again that if we settle this now, we will limit the future costs. But if we let this run, there's the risk of compensation or liability. Even as early as 1975, there was a sense that the 1970 Health Act was deficient in some way, needed to be reformed. Now, because, you know, you could make an argument that states simply couldn't afford to provide nursing home care free of charge to everybody. That's a reasonable argument. And so we have to find the right way to pay for the thing. But instead of passing a law to bring that in, the issue was fudged. There was no law, but instead you had, for example, a 1976 circular that took people's medical cards away from them so that they could be charged. Once you went into the residential care, you would be deemed ineligible for the medical card, and therefore you could be charged for your care. So these sort of administrative rules, which were unlawful, they went outside the legal powers of the officials involved, and yet they persisted for decades. And so we eventually got there, but it was 2009 before we had the Fair Deal scheme in law. So that's the issue, is that nobody grasped the nettle for decades. Yeah. And that's the scandal, or a large part of the scandal.
And this is a tried and tested strategy, seemingly, because RTE revealed last night that the state denied up to 12,000 vulnerable people their disability allowance payments, and the same strategy, by the shouting, was employed to limit the liability to the state. Nat, from Age Action's perspective, what needs to happen, I suppose, going forward? I mean, we're not going to sort out retrospectively here at this point, but going forward, what needs to happen to ensure that our older persons and their families aren't subjected to this type of, do we need an extra layer of oversight here? And if so, what form might that take?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that we have proposed. One is a commissioner for ageing and older persons. We've had a children's ombudsman since 2004. We've had a full minister for children, but we don't have that for older persons. We have a minister of state for older person services and mental health, but it's not quite the same thing as minister for ageing across all government departments. But if we had an independent commissioner, that would be an office that people could go to seek investigations, for research to be done, and an independent office that would have that all of government remit. So that's really missing. There is one in Northern Ireland, there's one in Wales, and there's good evidence there that how they have worked, effectively to defend the rights of older persons. So that's important. And the other thing we need to see completed is the state's long-term care strategy. We have a success story of an aging population. Most older persons are in good health, but we're going to double the number of people aged 80 and older in just 12 years. So we do need to plan for home care, for nursing home care, and for other forms of care. And that we're promised a commission on care, which, it seems it's in the programme for government, but that hasn't happened yet. So it's really important we see progress on that, and that we see a care policy joined up that's going to guarantee all of us that if, in older age, we're in a situation where we can't care for ourselves, and not everybody has family, for example, to step in, that there is a plan that is funded, that is transparent and fair, that how we will be looked after we've all made our contribution to society.
That would be agreeable to older people as well, too, because some of the options sometimes are, well, it's like that or nothing, and the like that is not what people want. I mean, I think a lot of the problem, not in this country, but in other countries, and this isn't a conspiracy theory, it's fact, is that we can legislate and plan and what have you, but unfortunately with slowing birth rates, there is a tipping point down the line whereby we have an older population and much fewer younger people to either fund through taxes or actually provide the care that's required. But I think that's a few years away. But I wonder if it's at the back or front of governments' minds around the country. We've seen in Japan, for example, they believe they're right at the verge of a crisis in that regard. But anyway, that's to say, I don't think me and you are going to sort that out today. Listen, thanks very much for your time, Nat. I really do appreciate it. Have a lovely day, and we appreciate you helping us highlight these issues.
Thanks very much indeed.
All right, bye-bye. Nat O'Connor, Policy Specialist with Age Action. 08660 25,000 is the WhatsApp and text line for you there.
Togu do Station, Highland Radio.
The 9 till noon show with Bluebird Care, providing home care services for all ages in Donegal. Visit bluebirdcare.ie and bring care home.
If you're about to use an electrical appliance, like your washing machine, which uses a lot of energy, just ask the question, is this a good time?
Ah, yeah, it's fairly breezy out. You're good to go.
If it's windy out, it is a good time, because wind generates renewable energy, which Ireland will be relying on more and more. To find out the best times for your electricity usage, sign up to our pilot at esbnetworks.ie/pilot.
Ireland's biggest ever tribute weekend is coming back to Donegal. Trib Bash 2023 is taking place at the Clanry Hotel, Letterkenny on the 10th and 11th of February. The nation's very best tribute acts take to the stage with the fantastic award-winning Johnny Cash and June Carter tribute show Cash Returns, the sellout show Mac Fleetwood as Fleetwood Mac, the smash hit ABBA tribute with Bjorn Identity, and the show-stopping Queen tribute. Limited tickets available now at the hotel reception and online at eventbrite.ie. Trib Bash 2023, the perfect Valentine's party weekend.
Highland Radio weather updates with Ireland West Airport. Salah, Nunes, the Beatles. You can now fly to Liverpool 8 times a week with Ryanair this summer. Ireland West Airport. Don't just take off, take it easy.
All right, a mix of sunny spells and scattered showers today. The showers will merge into longer spells of rain at times. Breezy with fresh to strong and gusty westerly winds. Highest temperatures of 7 to 9 degrees. Tonight, cloudy. Some occasional rain or drizzle. Lowest temperatures of 6 to 9 degrees in fresh west to southwest winds with some mist and some hill fog. Right, okay. Tony Grant is community activist and he's going to speak to us now about plans for the Tourist Visitor Centre at Dunree. It's expected to open in April 2026. Tony, good morning to you.
Good morning, Greg. Hi.
Thank you for joining us. Are you amongst those who have concerns about this development? And if so, tell us a bit about them.
Yeah, I certainly have. The proposed investment of 12 million for Dunree, the development in Dunree, is welcome. But it's welcome, but there's always a but. But the money should be used wisely and tastefully, and nothing should be suffer as a result. It should be a plus. It should be an addition. There should be no losses here. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying.
What's your main concern about the plans?
Well, the main concern is that it was floated in the media now that they're proposing to install this high-tech funicular vehicle that people would be attracted to the area from all over Europe, they believe, and they would come for this joyride in a glass cube that would take them up the hill to the top of Dunree Hill and to view the views of the surrounding areas, yes. And then that they would come down again and it wouldn't stop. It would go right over the water and there would be a wow factor there and a fear and they would all get excited about it. It'd be a huge exciting thing. And this is supposed to be something that people couldn't resist, and they would have to come and experience it.
I don't mean it funny, Tony, but it sounds fantastic. You've sold me, and as I say, I'm not being facetious there, but it sounds brilliant. So what's the problem?
Indeed, you see, but it's the wrong place. Dunree Fort is a unique piece of property. It's got a unique history. It's got a unique location, and it should be respected for that. And you know, to turn it into a theme park is ridiculous.
I think it's a slight overreach to call it a theme park, though, isn't it, though, Tony? I mean, the way you describe it in terms of it going out over the seas, it's not going to be flying. You know, people aren't going to be strapped in. It's slow moving. No. It affords people a view of our coastline that would ordinarily be hard to see. And what's really important to me, or what I think might be really important in this, is access, that people of all abilities in terms of moving around, whether they're wheelchair bound or whatever, would all be able to go up and experience the wonder of Dunree at the top of the hill as you've described it, that everyone would be able to see it, that we all could enjoy, regardless of our ability to walk or what have you.
Yeah, on the surface, Greg, now that sounds reasonable, you know. But, you know, this is they're already searching Europe to get the best machine to do this job. It hasn't been decided yet. And they're still doing market research. Bord Fáilte, as they said, they hasn't finally decided. But I'm just putting a word of caution and warning here that we live in remote Ireland here in Dunree and Inishowen, and very high skills are going to be required to operate this high-tech machine. And, you know, it's going to be an enclosed glass cube, and with wheelchairs in it, yes, as you said. And if that breaks down, what about the safe evacuation of trapped passengers from the lift? And it is really a lift. It's like a lift, but you know.
But Tony, I understand exactly, and where you're coming from, Tony, and you're making very strong arguments. But I suspect that your core objection to this would not be necessarily if it broke down and how you deal with that. Like, is it? Are you concerned about the track? Are you concerned about the track going up and down the hill? Are you concerned at the visual element to this box?
No, I don't want you to keep. I have to say it is my. I am concerned because I've worked in this industry for 40 years, and I know it like the back of my hand, and that's my concern is that we're installing a machine that might just become a white elephant in Dunree, because if it breaks down and we have to import the skills to fix it every time, it'll be out of order for a week before it's fixed. And that's not exaggerating now, Greg. Yeah. And also the cost of insurance, a comprehensive insurance and policy there for the comprehensive maintenance contract, which will be mandatory by the insurance company. This is all going to, I am estimating here, right? Mm-hmm. I am estimating that would cost $100,000 a year to operate, to work. And my other concern is once you've got installed that thing, that's just the thin end of the wedge. People will be looking for other experiences and exciting things to do there, swinging out of ropes and all sorts of things, which will destroy what we have in Dunree as a military. It was a military, and it's not military anymore, but it's an interpretive centre. It's got. I would love to put forward, and if you could bear with me for make it very brief, that there's something that would be far more valuable, and also return on investment would be more if we turned that into some sort of a marine institute. It's right on the water. And we've got a new Atlantic Technical University in Letterkenny, and we could award degrees through this, and people could have good jobs going forward, and we could restore the huts in Dunree, and we could have them as workshops and classrooms, and we could, and then we would attract people all over Europe, because we have in the next 5 years, Europe is going to designate more of Lough Swilly as a marine protected area, and here would be a fantastic hub to capitalise on that and to bring wealth to the area instead of a white elephant.
And this is why we're in this consultation process, and it seems the likes of Fulcher Island and others are very open to hearing your views, Tony, and the view of others as well. Because, I mean, obviously, no development's going to be 100% satisfactory to everyone, but it's important, and I think it's good to see that they seem keen to engage with the likes of yourself to get your views and draw on your experiences.
Yes, I agree. But can I say that people contacted me after the meeting that I don't know, never met, and they phoned because my phone number was I handed it out, and that they are upset because they are military families. Over 30 military families came to Buncrana and the environs around Inishowen, and their families came here from other parts of Ireland, and over 30 we can count at the moment, and maybe there are more, and they feel they are just being brushed aside. And there could possibly be an entrance fee to this, and and people now go into moment and they walk around, they go up the hill, and they have great freedom, and it's a wonderful place to visit. I recommend anybody.
Would you be happy with a balance if locals who traditionally use it for walking and other recreational activities maybe had free access, but visitors, tourists were charged? Could you see a business case for that?
It's going to be very difficult to do, Greg, because there's it's a right of way. It's a right of way through Dunree, if I'm not mistaken, because cattle used to be driven through there even when it was used by the army. And people I have asked them, would they be willing to have their stories written down now, because they are now, they're excited in the wrong way, in a negative way, by what they think is going to happen here, and they feel that they're being disregarded and disrespected.
And do you feel, is part of your concerns, Tony, as well, that you believe the history of this site has been disregarded or disrespected, in that, those making the trek at the moment perhaps have an interest in military and history, but what we might actually see is the majority of visitors are just going along for the ride, that really what is at the top of the hill doesn't really interest them in the slightest. Is that part of it, that maybe in some way it's even maybe disrespectful to the history of Dunree? Just running roughshod over the history of the fort. Right, I do agree, but I suggested I met Donegal County Council representative there the other night, and the board Fulcher, and as you said, they were very receptive to, sat down at a table and were very receptive to listening. And I suggested to them, and they agreed with me, that what we need in Donegal County Council is an environmentalist at the top decision-making position, so that things are done tastefully and that the environment is respected. And this is not happening. And I said, we need this in every Donegal County Council in Ireland. Every council in Ireland needs this. And I'm not annoyed anymore when I see Donegal do things, because I told them this the other night. I said, because I see that's your level of consciousness. You can't do any better because you're not aware of a better way of doing things. You're still pouring mass concrete into things far too readily. And an example of that was Swan Park. Far too much concrete. And everybody knows that now recently. That is the one thing. All they say, it is very nice, it is very nice, it is very nice, but there's far too much concrete. All right, caller says, I'm with Tony on this one. Far too much money being spent in Dunree, and so many people homeless and struggling with this announcement. Just don't think it's right now. I'm not sure you're making the latter point to that, but they're certainly agreeing with you in terms of the initial spend. Tony, thanks for your time. I hope you feel you've had your views well aired.
Well, thank you, Greg.
Okay, that's
Thank
good.
you.
As long as you feel you've got your voice. Okay, thanks so much indeed, Tony. Tony Grant there, community activist in that area. What do you think? 086 60 25,000. 086 60 25,000. Time to quickly mention our Community Hero initiative that we are working with iMotors on in relation to this. And it's really quite simple. We're inviting you to nominate a community hero, someone you see as a hero in your community that has been of a great assistance to you. They might work for an organisation. Maybe you're an organisation that wants to nominate them. The winner will receive access to a 231 Nissan Qashqai for 12 months, a brand new, beautiful car from iMotors for 12 months. So if you have someone in mind, and I'm sure someone popped into your head, that you think that this would be a lift for them, maybe they don't have a very reliable vehicle at the moment, or maybe they don't have a vehicle at all, and they would get benefit from this vehicle, please give us their name and jot down a few details. You don't have to write an essay. Send it to comments@highlandradio.com, or write it down and post it to Highland Radio Mountaintop Letterkenny, or drop it in to us. And the lines close, or the draw closes, or the competition. It's not really a competition, but it closes anyway. Entries close on the 22nd of February, and then we'll announce a winner on this programme on the 24th. So I think it's a lovely thing. And I think it's really generous as well. Access to a brand new, beautiful Nissan Qashqai for your community hero. Get your nominations in.
The 9 till Noon Show, brought to you by Bluebird Care, providing nurse-led home care services in Donegal. Call Bluebird Care 912-9562 and bring care home.
Transport for Ireland invites you to bring someone on board for free this February bank holiday weekend. Simply pay your fare using a TFI Leap card and your +1 travels free on participating TFI bus, train and tram services. This promotion is valid for travel from Saturday the 4th to Monday the 6th of February. So, with cleaner, greener and cheaper travel, the only question is, who'll be your +1? See transportforireland.ie for details, terms, conditions and participating operators.
The county's #1 talk show, the 9 till Noon Show on Highland Radio.
Okay, heading into another hour of the programme, but first let's find out what's happening in the newsroom. We say good morning now to Donna Marie Doherty.
Thanks, Greg. Good morning. It's claimed over 100 council houses in Donegal, while rented out, are not being lived in. It's believed in some instances some social homes are being listed on Airbnb or rented out to someone else. The EU and UK have reportedly struck a new customs deal which could put an end to talks around the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Times of London reports that Brussels has accepted a proposal that would stop checks on goods coming from Britain destined for the North. However, goods travelling from the North and into the Republic would be subject to routine checks. The paper says a separate long-term agreement is in the works, and that would see the UK upholding EU veterinary standards for meat and live animals. A Donegal deputy says it's imperative mental health services for children and young people in Donegal are properly resourced, fully staffed and provides the support when and where needed. Sinn Féin brought forward a motion in the Dáil last evening on the back of a serious concern over patients currently accessing child and adolescent mental health services in Ireland. Deputy Patrick McLaughlin says it's clear the process and plan are not fit for purpose. The Public Accounts Committee will meet today to discuss an alleged failure to provide payouts to families who were illegally charged for nursing home stays. Opposition parties want the government to release the documents associated to a so-called secret strategy. It's been reported that members of the current government were aware of the practice, but a spokesperson says the story has been misrepresented. $4.5 million has been allocated to Donegal County Council for 36 active travel projects. The money will go towards the development of segregated cycle lanes and widened footpaths, new walking and cycling bridges and new pedestrian crossings. Among the projects to benefit is the Letterkenny Cathedral one-way active travel scheme, as well as other projects in Fintown, Dunfanaghy and Buncrana. And Grainon Theatre in Letterkenny is set to get a major refurbishment. €600,000 is being invested to transform and enhance the amenity. Plans include repurposing of the upper foyer of the building to create a studio space, redesigning the box office and making the theatre more energy efficient. And finally, a new state-of-the-art community X-ray facility has opened up in Letterkenny. The facility has opened at the Errigal Chronic Disease Management Hub and will improve access to diagnostics in the community and reduce pressure on the acute hospital services. The HSC says capacity at the facility will increase in May with appointments of a second radiographer. It will operate Monday to Friday from 8:30am to 4:30pm with a current capacity of 25 to 30 pre-scheduled X-rays per day. That's all for now. Back again with more news at 12 o'clock.
Thank you very much, Donna Marie. Back with more after this really short break.
At Ulster Bank, our team is continuing to close current and deposit accounts, along with some of our branches. At this time, if your notice period and your deadline has passed, your account is now queued for closure. All personal and business account deadlines are fast approaching. You must take urgent action. If you are still relying on your bank account and in need of more support, please contact us immediately. Visit ulsterbank.ie, your local branch, or call 0818 210 260. Call costs may vary and calls from mobiles may not be free. Ulster Bank Ireland DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Now, yesterday, the GEA Central Competitions Control Committee ordered a replay between two sides that contested the All-Ireland Club final after a hearing into the debacle which was sparked during the original final when Kilmacrud defended the final play of the game with 16 active players on the pitch. A date for any potential replay could be complicated further as Glen midfielder Emmett Bradley is due to get married next weekend while the Alliance Football Leagues are also underway. Now, both clubs have the option of taking a further appeal to the Central Hearings Committee, and after that, the Dispute Resolutions Authority. It's getting a wee bit complicated. Brendan Devaney, presenter of the DL debate, and knows his way around the football pitch as well, of course. Brendan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Greg.
Good to have you on the show. Huh?
It's time to lawyer up.
Okay, right. Come here. It's complicated, isn't it? And it all started really with 16 players being on potentially, during a crucial, between a crucial part of play. Did the CCCC have any alternative other than ordering the replay, do you think?
They did, Greg, yeah. There's no actual rule in this, Greg, for something like this to say, right, there's 16 players on the pitch, it's a replay. There can be no action, the game could be forfeited, there can be a fine, or there can be a replay. So they had to adjudicate on this, and I think, Greg, the biggest issue in all this, and every GA person knows it, is just the mess, the time lag, and the lack of clarity. So once there was an incident in this, Greg, which was going to be trouble, the GA needed to get together on a Sunday evening, basically almost straight after the game, and at least warn the teams that, listen, we're looking into this. As it stands, Crokes have the cup, but there could be a replay. And if everybody was on board with that from then, so Crokes get the cup, they have the speech, they have their nights out, then this starts to rear its head. The GA left it to Waddy Graham's and Mahara to come forward with an objection, and instead of the GA acting on it. So that was in a very strange place, right? Because Malachy Rourke, their manager, who's a real GA man, come out after the game and go, listen, as far as I'm concerned, Crokes are champions, we won't be we won't be contesting this. But of course then there was a massive media circus that started then, and then of course Graham's had to decide then, Glenn Mahara had to decide, what are we going to do here? And for all we know, in that boardroom there could have been some people against it, I would imagine, and some people for it, but it could push that they would go with the objection. Both teams then met the CCCC and put their case forward, and that's why I'm wondering now if Glenn or the counter if Crokes or the counter object, the GA have basically already ruled that they think replay is the best option. As you're saying, I know you mentioned that wedding there. As far as I know, my friends in Galway have told me Shane Moss is away to the other side of the world. He's in a month's break to Australia and that. So, there's massive issues around the replay.
Can I ask your views if you were a Crokes player, right? There would probably always be an asterisk next to that win. Do you think the Crokes players want to play this again to put it to bed, or do you think they'd have been happy to say, look, it probably didn't make much difference, we were going to win anyway? Even the opposing manager suggested that we're going to take this win and crack on with what else we're doing. Or do you think Crokes, some of them would want to replay it themselves?
I definitely don't think they want to replay, and I would suggest that actually the players mentally and Glenn don't really want to replay other, because it's just one of them things. Like, as a player, it's all on the pitch. See this carry on that's going on. Listen, the players would have nothing to do with that. This is all boardroom stuff, and this is not all people saying, what are we going to do? Crokes, of course, were through last year, lost the final in the last play of the game. And Greg, you think about the season that is, most people never see that type of season where you win your county, you go through your whole province, you go through the All-Ireland semis, you come close to winning the title. Of course, Kilcoo beat them in the last basically play of the game last year. They go through it all again this year. They won the title, and now we're throwing up a replay. So it's a nightmare scenario for them. And I think for Glen, let's just say Crokes don't play it and Glen get it by forfeit. There could never. That actually would do, I think, more harm to their club than good. So it's in a very strange place now, because if Crokes do dig their heels in, Greg, and say they're not playing it, no one in Glen could ever say, here, we're All-Ireland champions for the 2022 season,
No, and a lot of it does go back to the GEA handling of this again. Convoluted rules, not showing perhaps the leadership they should have in saying, well, we'll look at it if Glen complains, when there is scope within their rules for them to have made a decision themselves. I'm not GEA bashing, i.e., the hierarchy of that organisation or that association, but they've made this more difficult for the clubs than perhaps it needed to be.
Yeah, and Greg, it's interesting because people look at the GA and they sometimes look at that as a professional setup, and you have so much amateur involvement here. And the people who made the mistake here, which was the officials, it wasn't Crokes, it wasn't Glen, it wasn't their fault. It was the officials' fault. But Greg, they're amateurs going up there and giving their time of that, and they're vital to the game. So part of you is kind of thinking, right, see if it was obviously something across the water and millions involved and all that, and millions involved in the outcome, it's a different thing, but it is an amateur game. Sometimes mistakes will happen. Referees make mistakes all the time. This now, you're saying, is that a mistake that changed the game? And I think if you ask 100 GA people, I'm not far from Mahara right now, it might be different if you asked 100 Mahara, but I think if you ask most people with any sense in GA, they would have said that player being on the pitch did not affect that outcome. Now, people might say that's impossible to say, but realistically now, if we're looking at the chances of that changing the game, if there was a point in it, Greg, and that guy had been enough to stop a shot going away, you might say, gee, he would have got the equaliser. But the fact they're going for a goal, very difficult thing late on. So it's one of those ones that's in such a grey area, but I think most people would have thought that the Crokes deserved to win the game. And as much it was a mistake from the officials, listen, it is what it is. I think. Yeah,
but I suppose you can't. Can you really factor in the what ifs? Like, say, for instance, it turned out that Glen had 16 players on the pitch, and one of them scored, and the outcome was different. It would be more clear cut in what you'd be calling for.
Yeah. And listen, we've had these instances before. I mean, we won an old county final a couple of seasons ago where a penalty taker for Niamh Conlon was on the pitch, took a penalty. That shouldn't happen, but there was nothing happened then. I guess, Greg, so I'm wondering, is it just because it was such a massive game and it was so highlighted? Listen, if this was a semi-final or down the tracks, a championship semi-final or something in a county, nothing would have happened here. And I do think, Greg, the sense of the media and the whole furore and what was right, what was wrong and what happened has really filtered into this. And there's huge pressure on Glen, I suppose, to either contest it or not. And to be honest, Greg, I thought that they wouldn't. But then some people say, listen, rules are rules, and so that's the two arguments that you're in there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If it was the other scenario that I mentioned, we wouldn't even be, because it would be clean cut. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. It would be, replay. You have to have a replay. So I can see it from both perspectives. So, obviously it's already a mess for one reason or another, Brendan. What do you think happens next then? I mean, if they do go to a replay, what kind of a game would it be? When would it be played? What would the outcome really mean?
That's it, Greg. I mean, if they did replay it and somebody won it, I think either team, particularly Crokes, would be like, right, that's it done now. Give us that cup. We've been chasing this now for a couple of years and we finally got our hands on it. If they were to win it, it would be much less a big deal than if Glen were now to turn around and win it. And I just think, Greg, the way people are in parishes and that, there'll be a lot of fun poking and nonsense in between, you shouldn't have that title. I just have that feeling, even if it was replayed and won now, if Glen won it by default I think it actually would be as a negative, as crazy as that may seem for the club, because how would anybody ever say, "Oh, we were All Ireland champions from 2022"? People would be like, "Yeah, whatever. You won it in a boardroom turnover. You lost the match in the pitch." So you know what people like the slagging and the messing and the abuse that actually they would get for that. So I think it's in a very funny area. If it wasn't to be replayed and going to Glen by default, it would be terrible, I think, for Glen to win the title like that. So it's in a very grey area. And listen, the GAA, it's really bad for
Do you know what might be the best outcome? The best outcome here is if Kilmacud appeal the decision and it's found in their favour, and then just Glen let it go at that point.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. The fact that they both made the recommendations to the CCCC on Monday night, and they now have initiated it as a replay, would tell me that what's going to change. They've seen all the facts. I'm sure they both put their cases forward. So the fact that they've said it needs to be a replay. But Greg, the thing is, the GAA under pressure, because it was their officials that caused the problem. So if you have a club saying, listen, this was illegal, what happened at the end of this match, you can understand the awkward position they're in now. But I go back to the biggest problem behind this was how long this took to sort, and the fact that Crokes have already celebrated, won the title, and all this has already. Do you know what would be funny? Right now, this is stupid, right? But set everything up as was for the last few minutes of that game, and go through that play again. Right? Can you imagine? Go through that play again, and everyone has to then stick to. Yeah, but I know it sounds silly, but can you imagine? Just replay that. Just like in snooker, the way they set the balls back up for a miss. Set everything back up, play out that last few minutes of the game. Boom. Listen, we'll get you on the CCCC, but right, let's imagine you do that. Let's imagine you did that, right? The chances of Glen getting a goal are close to zero.
Well, there you go. It would be all good.
And I think, but see, that is why most GAA people are like, here, they won the match, they were 2 up, there was one extra guy in there. Would that have counted? It's such a far-flung, I suppose, thing at that point that they could have got a goal, and I think that's why this has left a very fun.
Because look,
it's not a clean cut,
No, because it depends on where the position of all the 16 players were. It's a technicality here. It didn't prevent the 16 players. It's a technicality. It did not prevent a goal.
Yes.
So
that's it.
Right, Brendan. I still don't know what you think's going to happen. Can I try what's going to happen? Such is the mess.
If what we're hearing coming out of Crokes because of players away and players doing other things, you got to remember, Greg, the season. Them guys have put their life on hold. Of course, so have Glen, right? Because they're in an All Ireland run and they're after the Holy Grail of this All Ireland title, and they get there, right? So everybody now has plans. I mean, everyone in the background that's supporting these guys, I'm sure wives, girlfriends, partners are like, here, right, holiday time, let's go. Even if you're in a county team, get some time off and relax and go away and do other things. So now the GAA are saying, right, you got to be up to the All Ireland final, speed. Listen, next week or the Wednesday night or whenever the hell they're going to try and fit this in with the schedule. So it's a real crazy thing to try and pull together. I can see Crokes digging their heels in and saying no, Greg, and which will really add to the mess, All
right, okay, it is a mess. Brendan, listen, look, great to chat to you on a Wednesday. Take care of yourself.
Sorry, Greg.
All right, and don't forget Brendan's latest podcast, The DL Debate, where he reflected with a great team of guests. He reflected on all the weekend GAA actions available for you right now, actually. It's on our website in the playback section, so don't miss that. If you didn't hear it, yes, it's available for you to listen back, as I say, as a pod. All right, our next guest joins us after this short break.
Bluebird Care are hiring nurses and carers across Donegal. Call 912 9562. Bluebird Care are sponsors of today's show.
On Friday, February 3rd, 100 Euro Millions players across 9 countries are guaranteed to win €1 million each. 100 millionaires. Guaranteed. So, play Euro Millions on February 3rd.
The National Lottery. It could be you. Play responsibly. Play for fun.
Time to support your immune system and gut health. Choose new Udo's Choice Super 8 Immune Microbiotics with vitamin C to support the normal function of the immune system. Illness, poor eating habits and stress affect your immune system and can alter the balance of your friendly gut bacteria. 42 billion friendly bacteria per capsule and vitamin C makes new Super 8 Immune your #1 choice for gut health and immunity this season. Discover the Udo's Choice Microbiotics family range in the fridge at your local health store or pharmacy.
Richard Ryder is Communications and Marketing Manager with Disabled Drivers Association of Ireland, and he's with us on the programme now. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's our pleasure. And we're talking to you in the context of your new campaign. It's our Baywatch campaign. Great name, actually. And it always helps, doesn't it, to sort of get it more into... Exactly. It really helps in that regard. Right, so tell us... I think we probably know why this campaign's needed, but sure, look, give us an overview and what you hope to achieve from it, Richard.
Great, Greg. Well, firstly, thanks for having me on to highlight this issue. So first of all, we have two objectives. The first objective is we want to tackle the glaring hole in the existing legislation whereby the Gardaí and traffic wardens are not permitted to go onto private property, for example, into car parks in hospitals, schools, workplaces, shopping centres, that kind of thing, to issue parking fines for people who illegally park in wheelchair-accessible parking bays. And secondly, we want to just highlight the ongoing abuse of parking bays in general across the country. 42%, I suppose, of Irish adults that were interviewed in a national survey thought that you could go on, that guards could go on and give a fine. And the other 45% said they didn't know. So it's kind of a grey area. Not many people know. And if you did a straw poll with your listeners or people you know, they would have said, of course they can go in. But anyway, they can't. So that's the issue.
Gardaí and traffic wardens cannot go into your local shopping centre, your local garage, whatever business it is, and enforce rules if you pull your car in or someone pulls a car in a parking bay that's reserved for someone with a disability. Now, is it complicated by the fact that in my experience now, and I'm not greatly travelled, they seem to be crossovers. They seem to be either for people with a disability or parents with toddlers, like that. The ones
they're two separate ones.
Yeah, but some of them seems to be both.
I've never seen
right,
that.
Okay, I might have a look again to make sure I haven't. I'm not misreading. I don't park. I don't park in them in any case. But anyway,
the picture on the ground would be a child in a pram and that kind of stuff, and the woman with disabled is the picture.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, I haven't seen that, but yeah, I'll look out for it. But like, I suppose what we're also asking for is greater enforcement. So we need, 70% of DDI members said that their disabled parking badge or blue badge had never been checked by a guard or by a traffic warden, and I know a man, he's on the board of our directors. He's in 50 years of having a disability, no one's ever checked his card. So we need that kind of stuff to go on as well, There's a reason that people with disabilities need those spaces. So for somebody with a disability, be them a driver or a passenger, they need to plan their journey. If they're going into town, for example, they will need time to think, okay, where am I going to park? If I go there, can I park in that spot, etc.? Because they can't park in a regular spot because they may need to deploy a ramp or a lift at the back of or the side of their vehicle. So if you can imagine, when you get to a car park and you try to get out of the car and you have to suck your tummy in to maybe open the door slightly, that's not an option for somebody with a disability or somebody who has limited mobility. They need the wider space.
And what I know too is, and Richard, and I've spoken to them many, many times on this programme, is they keep going and go home, and then they don't go try to get back into that certain town because they know they'll do 2-3 loops and they can't do it, so they just go home, and then eventually what do? You go somewhere else, or you don't do. So your rights, your ability to function like everyone else can, is taken from you. It's really significant. It's not just an inconvenience.
No, you're discommoding. It's stressful for people. They may have thought about, I have to go into this doctor's appointment or whatever it may be, and they just have to go home. And you're dead right. We hear that time and time again. And look, it's fair enough if the space is taken up by somebody genuinely needing it and has the blue badge up there. Look, that's fine. But if it's somebody who's abusing the spot, and I've kind of come up with this over the last few days because I'm saying so much, serial bay abusers, it just kind of fits the thing that these people who do it all the time. People email me saying, look, down in my local supermarket, I go down and the same car is there all the time. What can I do about it? First question I ask is it a private car park? When they say yes, I say, there's nothing you can do. Only go to the management of that particular place and complain to them. They say, can I ring the guards? No, there's nothing. The guards will just tell you the same thing as I'm telling you. There's nothing you can do. Very frustrating for people.
I'm not sure. What is there precedent for Gardaí or traffic wardens enforcing the law on private property? And secondly, we do know some companies, major companies, they do employ, you have parking limits there. You've parking limits there. Exactly. But so is it a private-public kind of a mix here, or is the precedent for the Gardaí enforcing this kind, or do we need a statutory change in how these are recognised, or what do you think, Richard?
Yes, Greg, it is a statutory change that's needed. The legislation is contained in the road traffic regulations. And essentially what that means is, without going into the numbers and all that kind of stuff, if there is no local authority sign above the wheelchair accessible parking spot, or any spot, then the guard or traffic warden cannot issue a fixed charge notice. So it goes back to yonks ago to private property, and it's down to the property kind of end of things. So we need to dig down into that. We need to sit down with the government, the Department of Transport, and try to trash this out and say, look, let's try to change this. Because to me, it seems like one of those rules that kind of go, why is that? There's obviously there's a reason, and we've got to get to the bottom of it and try and kind of trash it out and change it. Because
dependent on the Greg.
It can be very hit and miss in the private, the clamping. Some days it happens, some days it doesn't.
I've never seen it. I've honestly never seen it.
Only in the big places, as you say, that can afford to bring in these places.
So in the interim, in the meantime, Richard, and it depends on where these parking spaces are, do we need maybe businesses to recognise the importance of these spaces and maybe casual enforcement of it, to hear a conversation like you and say, right, okay, in the absence of regulation, we are perhaps discommoding of our customers, and there's always other spaces available. I don't think you've ever seen a full car park and then someone says, I can't find anywhere I'm going to use. It's because it's closer to the door, let's face it, right? So
those are lazy.
Yeah, exactly. So do you think maybe then businesses should take note and say, right, okay, maybe, we don't want to be confrontational with people, but a gentle reminder, and it might be easier to hear from someone in a uniform walking out of a shop.
I totally agree with you, yeah. So it is upon the management of these centres or of a shopping place. They're asking people to come and shop with them, so they need to provide the proper facilities for people when they do come, and they need to enforce that as well. And they do, but I suppose it shouldn't just be on the management themselves. It should be the Gardaí and the traffic warden should be allowed to come in, and I suppose that's what we're trying to change. And we're going to do that. We're going to do our best anyway. And if people want to kind of help us on that, we have set up on our Facebook page a survey monkey, just asking the question, would you like to see the legislation to be changed? One, it says yes or no, and you just tick yes or no. So far, we've had 4 people who said no, and about 800 people who have said yes in 2 days. So that'll show you. I don't know who the 4 people are or the reasons why, but
maybe they clicked the wrong button. And Richard too, I think the reason why it might need enforcement is that a person who doesn't care enough that will use one of these spaces is probably inclined to tell someone who raises their concerns with them to F off, right? So, and I think your survey has shown that, right? So it is maybe an attitude that they have, that no one matters but me. And in that case, then maybe the only thing that matters is to penalise them. And that's probably why we do require this statutory change. I don't think genuine mistakes or, I'm sorry, I'll pull out now and you can pull in. That doesn't really happen. It's mind your own business or F off or something.
100%. And I've been on with you before, about 3 years ago, I think we did a survey asking people what the top 10 excuses that were given when they did approach somebody. And you're right. The first one is, I'll only be a minute. F off. I thought you could park here after 6 p.m. What does that mean? That people with disabilities don't go out after 6?
The curfew. It's that old curfew, isn't it?
That old curfew for people with disabilities. All joking aside.
But I wonder if they would have that view. Maybe they're confusing it with loading bays, but it just talks. If they believe that, maybe we need maybe more education then.
Yeah, I think it's,
Or it's just an excuse, Richard, yeah? Just nonsense, okay. Right. So I think what people can help here is obviously, first and foremost, to heed the call. Don't park in these spaces because other people who need them want to be able to access them. Secondly, go onto your website, and I think the more people that take part in that survey, the better. So just remind us of the URL there again, Richard.
Yeah, it's ddai.ie. That's ddai.ie. Or our Facebook page is Facebook Facebook.com/disabled drivers. Just Google it. Yeah.
We don't want people having aggro either, but call it out if you see it. Call it
That's
out
it.
too, isn't it?
Thanks, Greg.
All right, Richard. Great to have you on the show again. See you soon. Thanks so very much indeed. Bye bye. That's Richard Ryder, Communications and Marketing Manager with the Disabled Drivers Association of Ireland. Okay. Why not? Oh, this is someone who's along the same lines as me. Why not replay the last kick of the game with the correct number of players on each side? Again, it's never going to happen, but it kind of would, kind of answers the questions. Plenty of you messaging in to read the developments up at Dunree. I feel it should be left in its natural state, says this listener. Perhaps some money could be spent demolishing or refurbishing the old buildings that are in decay, but please don't spoil our beautiful Dunree. Well done to Tony. He spoke well. Thank you. I agree with Tony. It's such a beautiful, peaceful place. The idea of a theme park is just too far out of context for the place. I get the theme park reference, but there is an accessibility issue here as well, and it is a rail track running up the hill with a glass cube on it. People aren't going to have to be strapped in, or there's not going to have to be sick bags or anything. You know what I mean? I get what people are trying to express with the theme park element to it, but it's not for. It's not to give people a thrill, an exhilarating thing. It's to get people up and down and for people to be able to see. But I understand exactly where the terminology is coming from. A caller lives beside Fort Dunree. I agree with Tony. I think such a large development will destroy the true value and history of the area. Hi, I heard on the radio one day last week about a cafe in Letterkenny that only takes donations, but was wondering if anyone knows where in Letterkenny it is and opening hours. Thank you. It's in Donegal Town, I'm told, and we're not sure if there is one in Letterkenny. Could you ask Greg, is it a bank holiday this Monday coming? It's a public holiday, stuff the banks. Yes, it is. It's the new public holiday. To thank us? I don't know what it was for in the end, but it's St. Bridget's Day now. Lots of you out there last night making your St. Bridget's crosses. Hopefully you enjoyed that whole experience. Charged €130 for a daughter to do mock cert. Ridiculous. Can't understand it as teachers in school correct them. According to one circular I seen from one school, the marking's outsourced. And it was 120 at that school. And they wanted payment ASAP so they could figure out how many papers and what have you to order. As I say, free education, me bum. Ulster Bank in Letterkenny still open for anyone with trouble, I'm told. That's off the back of a contact earlier from someone who, quite worrying actually, closed their Ulster Bank account 3 weeks ago and their funds have still not arrived in their new account. I'd be slightly worried about that myself. LUH released a statement over a fortnight ago apologising to patients who had elective surgeries cancelled and stating they'd be reviewing over the following fortnight rescheduling. The affected patients are not kept informed, so it would be helpful if Letterkenny University Hospital now provided an update. Maybe Highland Radio could assist by contacting the General Manager, Mr. Murphy. Well, we'll put an inquiry in to find out. I mean, obviously we can't go into every elective surgery and when that might be rescheduled, but we can certainly ask on your behalf what is the situation in terms of providing those who had their surgeries delayed a new appointment. That might be helpful and it'll give us some sort of an idea or a time frame. Rightio, it is the 9 till noon show here on Highland Radio this Wednesday afternoon. We are going to be talking business very shortly. Stay right where you are.
Watch the show live now on YouTube, Facebook and at highlandradio.com.
The 9 till noon show with Bluebird Care, providing home care services for all ages in Donegal. Visit bluebirdcare.ie and bring care home.
Wet n Wild is 20 years in business and would like to thank and reward our loyal customers with a massive 20% off absolutely every product purchased in store during the month of February. Choose from our massive in-store stock of quality outdoor clothing, footwear, equipment and accessories, and 20% discount of all prices will be applied at the till.
With Business Matters, in association with ATU Donegal's Faculty of Business. If you're an owner or manager in a food production business, consider the new 1-year Level 8 Higher Diploma in Food Business and Product Innovation. It's just one 3-hour lecture weekly. Call 9186600 or email gary.mcgill@atu.ie.
Okay, Kieran O'Donnell, presenter of Business Matters, in studio now. Kieran, good morning to you.
Good morning, Greg.
How are you keeping?
I'm good, on yourself?
Very, very good indeed. Okay, an interesting guest on your show this week. I think we can say that reliably every week, but we'll get to that in a moment. Let's first get a roundup of some business news that's outside. Paddy Cosgrave, he's a controversial character. I don't want to say too much in case I have to feel his wrath on Twitter. I'll try and avoid that.
I will.
Good man, Paddy.
You give yourself a good chance there now.
Good man, Paddy. But anyway, you're digging into his private life. So Kieran, Paddy, go after Kieran.
Yeah, Irish entrepreneur and probably best known for being a co-founder of the Web Summit, Paddy Cosgrave and his wife Faye Dinsmore have paid €1.8 million for Coolmore Manor House in Rossnowda. That's down your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
So
good Wi-Fi down there.
The
too.
sale of the house, which is on an 11-acre site, was completed back in December, and the property had been on the market since 2018.
And Faye, a native of beautiful Ballantrae
Yes.
as well, of course. Okay, best of luck to them in their future home. New programme at ATU.
Yeah, Donegal ATU is now taking enrolments for a new Level 8 higher diploma in food business and product innovation, and that is commencing in March. It's 100% online, flexible, and it's over 12 months. It's co-designed by industry. Participants will use their existing place of employment as a learning environment, so people can check out ATU's social media platforms for more info than that, Greg.
All right, Mary Coughlin, a former Tánaiste, of course. She's chairing a conference upcoming.
Yeah, back in that same sector again for today only. Former Tánaiste and Minister for Agriculture Mary Coughlin, as you say, is chairing the first National Dialogue on Women in Agriculture conference, and that is taking place in Portlaoise. So just in relation to this, Greg, latest CSO statistics show that women account for around 13% of all farm holders in Ireland, and there are approximately 75,000 female farm workers in Ireland. So this points to over 58,000 women working in farming without visibility and without status as a farm holder.
Yeah, and that's an imbalance that needs to be.
So I'm sure that'll be discussed along other things today.
Yeah, for sure. Right, trading online voucher workshop. What's this about?
Yeah, just a wee bit of local news, Greg. To support small Irish businesses to enhance their online trading presence, trading online vouchers to the value of €2,500 are available to Donegal businesses. So it is compulsory to attend a trading online information session if businesses want to make an application for the voucher. So the next workshop locally is fixed for Wednesday, February the 8th from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. It is being delivered via Zoom and it is free.
Okay, now a decrease in the number of vacant houses.
Yeah, the number of vacant houses in Ireland has dropped to its lowest level in more than 5 years, and that is according to new statistics. Figures published by Geo Directory, that is the property data firm owned by Ann Post and Ordnance Survey Ireland, reveals that the number of vacant homes in Ireland fell by 7% last year to less than 84,000 at the end of December 2022.
And do we know from that, Kieran, I didn't get a look to dig into this, I didn't get a chance to dig into this yet, I'm not sure if you did. Are they habitable homes, I wonder? Because, you know, there's old houses here, there and everywhere that might have an air code but don't have a roof.
I'll give you an honest answer, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, okay, because it's interesting. I think Donegal's the 5th or 6th highest vacant. But
we're well up there with in terms of vacant properties.
I mean, again, I'm not sure if they cross over with to holiday homes, but certainly well worth digging in a little bit deeper there. But still interesting, 84,000 homes. Let's just look at it very simply. We've got 12,000 homeless people. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? There's.
I think it's an area more can be done, and probably sooner rather than later.
Just need the will. I think there's a way, and not, in other words, taking people's property from them either, but just finding a way whereby vacant homes are agreeably matched to people that need a house. Yeah. Need a home. Okay, right. Tell us what's coming up on this week's podcast.
Yeah, on this week's Business Matters, Greg, I am joined by the owner of Ghost Productions and owner of Kickboxing LK, Tommy McCafferty. Tommy's decision to buy a camera to help market and promote Kickboxing LK led to him setting up Ghost Productions in 2018, and his first paid-for job was for a gym in Strabane. Since then, he's moved into the lifestyle and commercial sectors. A two-time world kickboxing champion, Tommy also has a degree in agriculture. So on this clip, Greg, Tommy talks about the benefits of joining the Letterkenny Chamber of Commerce.
I found the Chamber a big benefit to me, to be honest. At the start, I kind of went, somebody mentioned the Chamber to me, and I went, nah, that's big business. That's not me. And I went down. It was a meet the Chamber morning, and I was actually at school with Christine Reynolds, who was friendly with Christine, and Christine says to me, she says, "You thinking of joining?" I was like, I don't know, Christine. This isn't really. I'm not a shirt and tie kind of person. And she goes, "Tommy, I'm vice president." And I burst out laughing. You're joking me? And she goes, aye. And I was like, is it worth my time joining? Give me a genuine answer. She goes, aye, it is, aye. And to be fair, it was. The people you meet, even just like-minded people, getting advice off people, you just realise that even if you're a sole trader or run the business yourself, you're not on your own. You have another 200 odd businesses that are all kind of tied together and always kind of working and bouncing off each other. It was a good. I've actually advised a couple of people since they do the same thing, and people are probably the same as me going, that's not for me. That's big business only.
I mean, he's a fascinating character, isn't he? I mean, that's a quite diverse portfolio of skills between architecture, agriculture, obviously the combative sport and everything else, and now in the in his other business interests, Kieran.
Yeah, he developed this, Greg, during COVID. It was a sideline to start off with, being involved in the kickboxing club I started in Letterkenny. As you say, he has a degree in architecture, but one of the things he said to me during the interview was he was on placement one day while studying for his degree, and he looked out the window on a summer's day and he says, I'm not going to be in here for I'm 50. So I had to get his mind made up at that stage that all the things might sort of take over. He's moved into different sectors in the business now: fitness, commercial, lifestyle. I suppose the one thing that was sort of set Tommy apart, and it's the one thing that I find with people who are involved in a sport, Greg, is their drive. And the quote he had to me was, he wanted to prove people that he will be better than what they said they would be, or than they said he would be. So the whole thing in terms of the martial arts, I suppose, the strive for perfection, and if they're doing whatever routine or exercise or combative movement they're doing, it has to be perfect. So it's practice. That's what Tommy's done with the business he's at, and he's always someone who looks forward.
Yeah, there's drive, there's determination, there's discipline.
Yeah.
And all those type of things that you get, and that's why a lot of people try and encourage people into the likes of boxing or kickboxing, young people, because it gives them focus and drive and competition and all that. Right, I think it's going to be a really interesting interview with Tommy McClafferty. It's available right now on our website, highlandradio.com, and it's currently at the top of the page, but it will always be in the playback section, the on-demand section, also available wherever you get your podcast, and it's on air as well a little later on in this week, I suppose the weekend, Kieran.
Yeah, after the 6 o'clock news, Greg, on Sunday evening.
And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, feedback on the programme, suggested content, just to say how nice you are, how do they do so?
Business Matters at highlandradio.com.
All right, and how many have you done now? There's a big catalogue there of stuff.
129.
And I know I repeat myself, Kieran, but I just think it's worth it because there's a great deal of effort and there's a great deal of information in that series of podcasts. You don't interview someone on a Tuesday asking them what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
A lot of these are timeless. These are great insights to anyone who's in business or thinking about business or just has an interest in it. Some really, really great stories in there, Kieran.
Yeah, and the other thing is the fact that they're on the archive, you can go on and play it anytime you want.
Exactly. All right, plenty of listening there if you're out and about. All right, Kieran, chat to you next week. All being well, thank you.
Good morning, Greg.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Take care. All right, we're going to take a really short piece of music. Well, it's not a really short piece of music. Just while we gather our breath. Stay where you are. More to come before 12.
Donegal. Call Bluebird Care 9129562 and bring care home.
Guess what? What? Larkin's of New Mills are offering an early bird special for only $6.95 Monday to Friday from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. A full menu is available 7 days per week along with daily lunch specials. Call in any time to Larkin's of New Mills or phone 074 9126 679 and let our family look after yours.
Highland Radio weather updates with Ireland West Airport. Discover Edinburgh this summer with Ryanair's 3 times weekly service. Stunning architecture, endless winding streets and an awe-inspiring castle. Ireland West Airport. Don't just take off, take it easy.
Breaks of rain easing through the afternoon, leaving some occasional rain or drizzle by this evening. Breezy with fresh to strong and gusty westerly winds, temperatures of 7 to 9 degrees. Now, Ireland is perceived to be less affected by corruption than the UK for the first time. The annual Corruption Perception Index from Transparency International has put Ireland in 10th place out of 180 countries. Denmark is perceived to be the least corrupt country with 90 points out of 100, while South Sudan is bottom of the list with 13 points. The chief executive of Transparency International Ireland is John Devitt, and he joins us on the show now. John, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us. So, sorry, it's not clear from that script I was given. We're 10th from the bottom or 10th from the top?
10th from the top.
Right, okay.
So we're perceived to be the 10th least corrupt country in the world out of 180 countries that were included in the index this year. The more points a country scores out of 100, the cleaner it's perceived to be. And the index is essentially a poll of polls. We're using survey data gathered from international think tanks and agencies that monitor political risk and corruption. These are agencies that are used by investors, credit rating agencies, and others to determine the likelihood of corruption when doing business in a particular country. And they ask business people, what's the likelihood of encountering a public official being asked for a bribe? What measures are in place to prevent corruption in public contracting? What's the likelihood that senior public officials will steal public resources? And we define corruption as the abuse of power for private gain. So it's not covering, it wouldn't be dealing with issues such as the one we've been reading about in the papers over the last couple of days, involving, legal strategies depriving people of their rights to compensation. So and abuses, or what are perceived to be abuses of power more generally. We're looking almost exclusively at the abuse of power for private financial gain or personal advantage here. Ireland is improving, or has improved slowly, gradually since 2012, when we suffered our biggest fall in the index on the back of both the publication of the Moriarty Tribunal and the Mahan Tribunal reports, which suggested that corruption was endemic in particularly in local governments for decades. And we haven't seen since then any major public controversy that has.
But part of that is reports into some of it, not least in this county, are gathering dust on shelves. They're not being published.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, it's not to suggest, and I should make it clear that corruption is not a problem here.
Yes, but if you don't publish reports, you don't know the extent of it.
But I think that is a factor. But I think the fact that we haven't had a scandal of the scale that was reported on by both Moriarty and Mahan Tribunal reports is probably a factor in improving international perceptions, because you have to contrast that with events, for example, in Westminster and Whitehall, where corruption at a political level is endemic right now, where VIP lane contracts were given to associates of Tory ministers for PPE during the pandemic, where there are no caps on donations to political parties, meaning that millionaires and billionaires can give as much money to political parties there. And we'll often see a link between the awarding of peerages in the House of Lords and donations.
So obviously there's scales here. So say, for instance, a series of instances where it appears politicians haven't been completely transparent with the standards in public office, for example. would those type of controversies be enough to influence the perception of Ireland, or does it have to be on a bigger scale than that?
They could be, but they're not making international news to the same extent as, for example, the Mahon Tribunal or Moriarty Tribunal reports did. They're not appearing in the New York Times or the Guardian, for example. And those are the papers that international observers are reading. They're certainly not on the same. What we've witnessed over the last few months, for example, failure to disclose personal interests or financial interests by ministers, or to disclose election funding or expenditure, election donations or expenditure, are not likely to shift expert perceptions on levels of wrongdoing here.
As I say, I don't mean this in any way, I don't mean it to be terribly controversial, but I presume there are those that would look at this index and might be drawn to a country that seems more corrupt than another.
Unlikely.
If they have, maybe not pure intentions from a business perspective, or if they want to influence certain things. Like, in other words, I just get a sense that maybe there could be some they're looking at the most corrupt rather than the least corrupt as an attractive proposition.
It's highly unlikely. Businesses view corruption as a tax, and businesses are not inclined to pay taxes if they can avoid them. There's a direct correlation between levels of foreign direct investment and perceived corruption around the world. So the more corrupt you're perceived to be, the less likely you are to attract investment, because it creates uncertainty on the part of investors. They don't like having to deal with corrupt officials, in part because they don't keep their promises. If someone is prepared to pay more bribes than you are, if your competitor has an inside track with, or has a personal relationship with a public official, you're going to lose out.
Yeah, so we're saying that in versus scale over in UK. It's the perception there, but then of course we see at the top level the government signing deals and then trying to change them or not agree to them. So in terms of, obviously what you want is to be less corrupt as possible, right? So that's one way you can improve your rating here. Is there anything else that you believe we should be doing, or that the government should be doing, to improve that in terms of, I suppose, more transparency or what have you? So is there any ways you can move up that list other than, not making the New York Times front page? Let's put it like that.
Well, we can't take it for granted that we'll continue to make progress on this index. We know from monitoring international perceptions that your score can go up or down in any 1 year, and it is highly sensitive to scandal. So we need to do far more to prevent controversy and crisis, and put in place safeguards against abuse of power, or even the perception of abuses of power. That means we need to enact long overdue reforms to our ethics legislation to avoid the kind of controversy courted over the last year or so by ministers, whether it be Robert Troy or Damien English, failing to declare their financial interests. We need to pass legislation, the ethics or the public sector standards bill that should have been restored at the last election. That would have empowered the Standards of Public Office Commission to do its job, to undertake investigations without a prior complaint, and would have also expanded the list of interests that our TDs and office holders need to disclose. We also need to do, in the meantime, we could modernise, and we should be modernising the way this information is collected from political candidates or public officials. Currently, they're simply asked to fill in their interests or their electoral statements using pen and paper very often. Those documents are then scanned and posted on different websites, making it nearly very difficult for investigative journalists to look into the financial interests, personal interests of our public representatives, meaning that it takes someone like the Ditch with dedicated resources to look into this, for this to come to public to come to light, come to public attention. We shouldn't be waiting for crisis. We should be preventing corruption and wrongdoing, or even the perception of such, by enacting these reforms, modernising our systems, and also need to also pay attention to the role Ireland is playing in laundering the proceeds of corruption from overseas. Ireland is home to one of the biggest financial services sectors in the world. We have trillions of euros in funds managed by wealth managers, banks, financial services, and much of that is likely to be the proceeds of corruption and organised crime. And we need to do far more to shore up our responses to that, to empower the Gardaí and resource them adequately to investigate, and then to also do adequate impose checks on companies established here, which are often used as fronts to evade sanctions or to launder the proceeds of crime and corruption too. Yeah,
really interesting stuff. John, maybe you've already touched on it, but some of the issues that have reflected poorly on Ireland that leave us with the rating that we have you just been giving us examples of what is determining our rating in this, or is there any other major issues that sort of broke internationally that have affected our rating?
Some of the think tanks that are whose scores or whose research is used in this index cite reforms that have taken place over the last few years, including the Regulation of Lobbying Act.
Okay, get you.
The Protected Disclosures Act. So we have made some progress, but like I say, we need to do much more, build on that progress.
Be more proactive and less reactionary as well.
Exactly. There's a lot more to do as well. There's an attitudinal or cultural shift required in the civil service as well, to make information more proactive in sharing information with the public. And with journalists, you shouldn't have to file a Freedom of Information request every time you want details of public spending or how a decision was made. That information should be put into the public domain as a matter of course. And it would also do much, not just to build confidence internationally, but also to build public confidence here in Ireland, that our officials are acting in their interests and not on behalf of anyone else's. They shouldn't be.
All their own. Okay, fascinating. Really appreciate that, John. Very insightful. Thank you so much for your time. Great stuff. John Devitt there, Chief Executive of Transparency Ireland. Transparency International Ireland, actually, is the full title. Okay. He mentioned the Ditch there. Quite interestingly, the Ditch now are members of the Press Council, so they'll be in attendance, the journalists in the Dáil. So it would be interesting to see what kind of stories they uncover from within, as well as without. Hi, Greg. So angry how landlords can ask a €700 deposit and then charge $150 weekly for rent. When you've people coming into this country and getting everything for free, it's wrong how our own people are being treated in this country, indeed. And again, I'm not here to... It's not my fight or whatever, but... historically, that's how we've been treated. By the way, it's not that it's changed since anyone else has come in here. The current issue about overcharging patients in private homes for 30 to 40 years being illegal, it crosses my mind. What about girls being sacked for their employment in the civil service for getting married? There are a few people still living who suffered this guilty and just government verdict, and very few of the present population even know of this crazy law, if it was a law. Could this be as illegal now as the private homes issue? After all, it was implemented by the same Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael governments. Is there any hope of a claim here? Well, it's well recorded that, and I think an awful lot of people that were impacted by that still are currently suffering because their pensions, what pensions they're entitled to or what they're getting, and they're not, I think a lot of them are still very much with us and suffering as a result. Ulster Bank, I read that one already, thank you very much for that. What is going on in Donegal? I've been trying to contact a local councillor, and despite several calls this week, I've had no one answer the phone, and despite leaving messages, no one has called me back. What is the point to these people being elected if they'll not help once elected? Well, listen, I mean, it was just, maybe it was over a weekend or something. If you want us to pass on any information on your behalf, get in contact with us. We'd be happy to do that for you. Many of those pods used during COVID for outside dining are still there in my town. There are 4 on top of disabled parking bays. Interesting point. I have asked several times for them to be moved, and they're still there. I'd love Richard's campaign to help have them moved. All right. Okay. That's a good point you make there. Thank you. All right. Thanks very much to all of you who listen to the show. We really do appreciate it. And for those of you who got involved in the conversation. And